close to the last time that you see this. I certainly hope so. It was about a year ago that we were just beginning to learn how the world around us would change as a result of COVID-19, and it has been, as the Commission knows, a challenging year that required all of us to pivot at work and at home. Thankfully, we've seen the number of new positive cases continue to decline. The number of Missourians getting vaccinated increased recently. Governor Parson has made it a priority for the state workforce to return to their pre-COVID work location by this last Monday, May 17th. And so to honor this priority, MDC developed a return to office plan, which was implemented and folks back at the office location as of this last Monday. Turkey season, 2021 spring turkey season, sadly for me, came to a close on May 9th, but I was tagged out, so I guess that's probably a good thing that I didn't continue to hunt. Hunters harvested and checked 31,798 birds during Missouri's 2021 regular spring turkey season. Top harvest counties were Franklin with 710 birds, Texas County with 666, and Callaway with 639. Young turkey hunters also harvested just under 2,800 birds during the youth weekend, bringing the overall 2021 spring turkey harvest to 34,593. Among those harvesting birds were several lucky youth hunters that participated in the Governor's Youth Turkey Hunt. A special thank you to Commissioner Harrison for participating in the event and hosting a youth hunter for the weekend. I think it was a good time had by all. This is a more common slide in my slide deck to the Commission. The Feral Hog Elimination Partnership continues to make very good progress. For the year, we removed 5,532 hogs from Missouri's landscape, and by May 10th, we had removed 171 just in the month of May. Now, we still have a ways to go, but we are making good progress. The partnership has already started working on organizing summer operations that focus on the Mark Twain, Potosi, Salem, Fredericktown districts in the Current River corridor. We're also finalizing our cooperative agreements with the University of Missouri Extension for 4 cooperative positions. Staff are also planning a summer media event, and Jake and Greg are working on legislative and ag partner tours. So a quick story, since we're in the Peck Ranch area, I thought I'd share this. This winter, staff conducted systematic baiting in the Peck Ranch Conservation Area and private and public land around Peck. They discovered no hogs in the area at the time. However, in early April, staff started to see signs of feral hogs on parts of Peck Ranch, so they quickly went to work and baited an area and successfully trapped 42 hogs in one trapping event before turkey season. With turkey season over, staff will increase monitoring efforts in the area and remove any remaining hogs. This is just a great example of how monitoring and trapping can effectively remove large sounders of feral hogs in a single trapping event. Arbor Day. So communities and groups in Missouri celebrated Arbor Day events throughout the month of April. These events happen in small communities like Exeter, Missouri, and large communities like St. Louis. MDC Foresters assisted with many of these celebrations throughout our regions, speaking about the history of Arbor Day and the many benefits of trees. An example, in the Northeast region, MDC Forester Kyle Monroe helped the city of Hannibal celebrate Arbor Day by planting a tree at their Riverfront Park with local 4th graders. In the Southwest region, MDC Forester Paul Johnson helped the city of Marshall recognize the winner of Marshall's largest tree contest during their Arbor Day ceremony. One of the most unique Arbor Day events happened in St. James, where MDC Forester Mike Fleschauer assisted the city in planting 350 tree seedlings to start their own tree nursery. At Commission headquarters, we honored 2 past employees, Maggie Lathan and Donna Baldwin, who recently passed shortly after retiring from the department. On April 30th, staff and their families gathered to recognize the incredible lives of Maggie and Donna by planting a white oak and a fringe tree. Speaking of forestry, also in April, staff conducted an internal audit of the department's forest lands as part of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. The audit found no major or minor nonconformities to the standard. The CFI certification provides validation that we are managing our forest resources in accordance with policies and procedures established by the department. Each spring, our forest program certification specialist leads the effort to review and report. Then in the fall, a third-party auditor also reviews our compliance to the SFI standard and the internal audit report. SFI certification has been a great tool to improve our state land management processes. We also learned in April, the USDA Forest Service has approved the Missouri Comprehensive Conservation Strategy as fulfilling the requirements of the State Forest Action Plan with no recommended edits. This is fantastic news, and just in case you forgot, this is the first time ever that a state has combined their State Forest Action Plan, their State Wildlife Action Plan, and other conservation strategies into a single framework and document. So our overwhelming gratitude goes out to the leadership team that really was instrumental in putting the comprehensive conservation strategy together. Very historic. So what else has transpired since the last commission meeting? Well, March 15th marked the start of the Missouri snagging season. This year, we had the opportunity to take out Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe on his first spoonbill snagging adventure, where he landed a 64-pound paddlefish. Yes, Jake, it was larger than yours, and the largest of that particular trip. Now, here's a fish story for you. Joe Richter from Cassville snagged a 57-pound paddlefish on Table Rock Lake this spring when he noticed a small metal ring attached to the jaw of the paddlefish. It was tag S777. It was part of NBC's paddlefish tag. Into Table Rock Lake in the 1970s. Since paddlefish do not naturally reproduce in our three large reservoir fisheries, NBC maintains these reservoir populations with annual stockings of hatchery-produced fingerlings. NBC staff have been raising paddlefish at Blind Pony Hatchery near Sweet Springs for reservoir stockings since 1970. Paddlefish broodstock are collected from the three reservoirs each spring and taken to Blind Pony where the eggs are fertilized. The fry are raised at the hatchery until September, when almost 40,000 10 to 12-inch fingerlings are then stocked in the Lake of the Ozarks, in Truman Reservoir, and Table Rock Lake. So that was a bit of a historic catch. On to chronic wasting disease results. In March, we completed our monitoring, management, and testing efforts for the 2020 and 2021 chronic wasting disease surveillance year. From those efforts, we collected more than 15,300 tissue samples from mostly hunter-harvested deer for CWD testing, and we confirmed 44 new cases of chronic wasting disease from the deer tested. The new findings bring the total number of CWD cases in the state to 206. MDC has tested more than 152,300 deer since the first case of chronic wasting disease was found in free-ranging deer in Missouri in 2012. Of the 44 new cases, 2 were found in Putnam County and 1 in Pulaski County, both of which had not previously seen cases of chronic wasting disease. Because of the proactive work by staff and landowners and hunters and businesses, CWD remains relatively rare on Missouri's landscape. The Recovering America's Wildlife Act, now known as H.R. 2773, was recently reintroduced to the 117th Congress by Representatives Dingell from Michigan and Fortenberry from Nebraska. As the Commission knows, if this passed, it would provide $1.4 billion in dedicated annual funding to state and tribal fish and wildlife agencies. The funding would go toward the conservation and monitoring of at-risk species, known in the states as species of greatest conservation need. in order to work toward reversing population declines. The previous version of RAWA, introduced to the 116th Congress, saw over 180 bipartisan co-sponsors. For Missouri, if passed, RAWA would mean roughly $21.6 million for conservation efforts, which of course now would be guided by our comprehensive conservation strategy. So fingers crossed for passage in this congressional cycle. So here's news on our upgraded MDC website. We launched a new updated website on May the 10th. This website builds upon our existing site's organization, but it offers a new look with more popular content, now being easier to find. During the redesign project, we had approximately 150 public volunteers to help us with all aspects of the new site. The volunteers did a series of site organization exercises. They took specific surveys to provide feedback, and they tested the new site for any issues or problems. Based upon the feedback from these users, the new design uses a cleaner color scheme and white space to better allow users to focus and find their content that they're looking for. Key improvement users may also notice better search results thanks to a new search engine powering the site, easier to find information on buying permits, and a new section on invasive and nuisance animal and plant species. Popular web pages that have been improved include places to go to discover nature on MDC areas. It includes an online field guide to help users identify Missouri's plants and animals. It includes a hunting and fishing species A to Z pages to help identify game species. We also added a section on the homepage that highlights online methods and other alternatives to make doing business with MDC even more effective and efficient. So make sure that you click on the new website if you've seen it in recent days. I want to mention a new media campaign that's about to be launched. If you've heard the term YAYA, it means youth and young adults. And the Yayas in this country have a strong market impact and are shaping our conservation in the future, including how they connect with the outdoors. So research shows that Yayas care deeply about environmental issues, and at the same time, they're feeling the effects of stress and burnout. And we know that nature is a healing place, whether they know it or not. So we're really trying to figure out how to connect the dots and make nature a valuable aspect of the Yayas' lives. So we asked Yayas to help us with the answer. So last school year, along with the Nevada Department of Wildlife, we engaged with top journalism students at the University of Missouri who provide premier student staff advertising services to national clients like Ocean Spray and Chevrolet. But we asked them to help us develop a conservation relevancy campaign focused on these 18 to 24-year-olds that then all state fish and wildlife agencies could benefit from. And so Never Lose Touch was the winning campaign. The concept, really focusing on the concept that 87% of Yayas surveyed have spent time outdoors as a kid, and they felt very nostalgic about those times. So we're really trying to connect those dots. That campaign is about to launch, and we'll look forward to reporting back on the success of it to the Commission in the future. April flooding, you can just look outside and look at the current river and know that waters are up here as well. But in April, Southwest Missouri didn't just have April showers. I think they experienced more like a monsoon. On April 28th, heavy localized rain fell across Southwest Missouri. Unfortunately, this did result in flooding both at Busick State Forest and at Roaring River State Park and the hatchery. As usual, department staff were quick to minimize the landowner financial and technical assistance grants in determining the conservation and economic outcomes of buffer projects. The Sand Prairie Restoration Project will focus on restoring and protecting sand prairies in southeast Missouri. The Precision Farm Data and Buffer Placement Project will target conservation activities to unprofitable cropland acres and then leverage existing voluntary carbon and other ecosystem service market opportunities. So new grant opportunities, we're very excited about getting started on that particular program. And our new agent class, the 2021 Conservation Agent Academy, started on April 1st. And the 16 trainees have already begun accomplishing a great deal during their first month of training. As a newly formed team, they elected a president and vice president and developed a motto and core values. The deputies and I had opportunity to visit with them and spend some time with them. They also received post-training on various topics, including tactical communication, cultural diversity, defensive tactics, use of force, death notifications, survival mentality, constitutional law, wildlife code and state statutes, health and nutrition, and stress management. And I think that was just in the first month. So they have been very, very busy, and I know it's been fast and furious, but we're very excited about really the progress of our new agent class and look forward to their graduation in the coming months. Briefly, just Leadership 2.0. I know the Commission, it's a priority for the Commission, it's a priority for this administration to make sure that leadership development is a priority. Now, we use the graduates of these different leadership classes and programs, and then how do we use them more effectively in the agency and continue that professional development as leaders. So we just launched Leadership 2.0. You have to be a graduate of some of the programs I just mentioned, but it's a great opportunity, we believe, for very effective two-way communication, a way to continue to develop leadership throughout the agency, a way to support our organization as a learning and adaptive organization, and promote positive change within the agency, and really to act as a think tank. We just launched Leadership 2.0. At a minimum, we'll be meeting quarterly, and many of our existing members of leadership will be involved in those leadership efforts. Almost done here. Have to shout out to Malcolm Baldridge. I know we reported to the Commission before on our progress, but I just want to mention with COVID and the reorganization, we did have to slow down our Malcolm Baldridge efforts for a bit, but we're now back on and ready to re-engage. The Malcolm Baldridge criteria is administered at a national level, but agencies who are early in this journey are encouraged to start at the statewide level. The Missouri State Level Awards has historically been administered through the Missouri Center of Excellence, called the Missouri Quality Award, but in recent times, this Missouri program has been transferred to the Texas Quality Foundation. But MBC is planning to respond to the basic criteria questions that address leadership and strategy and our customer base and data and workforce and business operations, other categories. Then we'll receive formal feedback from the application. So those efforts are now underway. So we're excited to get moving on Malcolm Baldridge and believe it will be the very first Missouri State agency to go through this process. And I always end with a bit of a NBC history notes, kind of remembering where we have come from. So, a few history notes reading. On May 10th, 1980, Shepherd of the Hills Visitor Center opened to the public for the first time. May 20th, 1976, the Commission approved winter trout fishing at Bennett Springs on a trial basis. Of course, we know today, winter trout fishing is offered in all of the trout parks in over 40 community lakes around the state. May 27, 1976, the Citizens Committee turns in the petition to the Secretary of State for the 1/8 of 1% sales tax for conservation. And May 19, 1961, Tom Russell and Jerry Hamilton succeed in hatching paddlefish eggs at Bennett Spring Hatchery. This was the first time known by science and has served as a model for other states' paddlefish stocking programs. So it's the little things we do for conservation today, that add up to big things for conservation tomorrow. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that is my report, and I'll pause for a moment to see if there are any questions.
Questions?
No questions, just regular report. Yeah.
Thank you.
Please continue.
All right, well, next up on the agenda, I am absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, who is joining us from New York, in part because last evening he received by the Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation the Core Discovery National Conservation Award for Leadership in Conservation at the national level. And so because he was in state, it's a wonderful opportunity to have him come and address the commission as well. And so I'm delighted to introduce to the commission and to our staff and to our guest, Mr. Simon Roosevelt. Simon is the principal of Olympia Fund Management and the Theodore Roosevelt's great-great-grandson. Simon is an avid hunter and conservationist whose interests have involved him in a wide variety of conservation and environmental projects in North America, in South America, Africa. Current projects include the Conservation Roundtable, a forum that brings together the CEOs of American hunting, environmental, and land conservation organizations to discuss and act on larger issues of common concern. He's also a writer and speaker on hunting and conservation issues. He's currently at work on a book portraying the essential connection between American hunting and conservation, intended primarily for non-hunters. The book will be a tribute to American hunting, its conservation legacy, and crucial role in conservation today. He's also, in his spare time, a commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for the New York City region. He's a regular member and director of the Boone and Crockett Club and a member of the Campfire Club of America. He's the chairman of the Scenic Hudson Land Trust and a member of the President's Advisory Council of the National Wildlife Federation, and finally the current chair of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. And so, Simon, it is a delight to welcome you to Missouri, to Van Buren, Missouri in particular, and we look forward to a few comments. Please welcome Simon.
Commissioners and members of the Missouri Department of Conservation, thank you all for having me here today. I'm proud to report that I am a proud, successful Missouri turkey hunter this year. Having had a very happy visit to your state only a couple of weeks ago. But I'm delighted to be back here today. Delighted for the opportunity to make a few remarks. One note, I think, if I could add to your history notes, Sarah, on May 21st, 1804, Lewis and Clark set out from St. Charles, Missouri on their expedition. So however many, then 217 years or so ago today. I'm also here today as the chairman of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. And just to tell you a little bit about that, I guess if I may, our mission is working with Congress and the state legislatures and governors across the country to advance and protect hunting, angling, recreational shooting, and trapping across the United States. We work at the federal level, the state level, and across the state levels. And key to our success in those areas, I guess I should say, we have one of the largest and most bipartisan caucuses on Capitol Hill, with over 250 congressmen, Democrats and Republicans, evenly divided. At the state level, we organize state sportsmen's caucuses, state legislative caucuses, currently in 49 of 50 states. Hawaii is the answer, if you're wondering. That's sticks in our craw, and we work on it every year, and we just haven't gotten there yet. We also happily have 29 of our nation's governors as members of the Governor's Sportsmen's Caucus, including your own Governor, Mike Parson, who I was privileged to be with last night, to share the stage with. Key to our efforts at both the federal level, particularly I guess starting at the federal level, are our partnerships with other organizations. And so I would, and among those most important partners are state fish and wildlife agencies, and particularly I would mention also the umbrella organization for state fish and wildlife agencies, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and its current president, your director, Sarah Parker Pauly. And the work that AFWA does in partnership with us, and we in partnership with them, is really instrumental in advancing some of the most important issues that we face at the national level, and also locally, as we look out from really the beginning of the 21st century. Among those things, and key, I know, to Sarah's initiative is relevancy work that has been launched really across the country, and as is on the screen today, here here at the Missouri Department of Conservation with your website, with the CRM software that we recently announced. Those are the kinds of things, public engagement, that we all know and have known for a long time and have been working on trying to solve the equation. And I think we all realize that we're at an important inflection point now in terms of the number of people that have been going outside during the COVID pandemic and really starting before then. And how do we keep those people engaged and active and thoughtful? How do we bring them into our ranks? So the efforts, both at the national level and the state level that you all are doing here in Missouri are really, I guess they lead to the second most important element of our work at CSF and in the conservation community generally, which is leadership. And here in Missouri, I think I can say that you have a proud tradition of leadership in many of these areas, both in terms of partnership and also in terms of public engagement. Certainly your sales tax for conservation at almost 50 years now. It's really, that's a model that more states should emulate. What you do with the Missouri Department of Conservation, your partners roundtable, bringing together different and disparate voices with their different perspectives on conservation and conservation solutions is essential. We don't any of us have the right answer. There isn't the right answer. We have lots of different interests. And our great challenge, as we go forward, is really figuring out how to merge those interests in a way that works for everybody. It's not going to work 100% for everybody. Nobody's going to be totally happy, but the right solution is the solution that works for everybody. If I could, I guess I'll just take a couple of conservation management on the ground and ensuring that conservation programs and designs are done in partnership with the folks that manage these things on a daily basis. It talks about the importance of hunters and anglers and others as providing important input and being crucial to managing conservation management. It talks about the importance of private lands as an essential part of the overall mosaic of land conservation. So all of those things were incredibly hopeful and great signs for us, and it did not include, notably, any of the things that we were deeply concerned about, which were arbitrary metrics. The idea that there should be large areas of the country and we should close them off simply for the sake of closing them off without any thought to a larger conservation plan. So that gives us a lot of hope. There's not a lot of detail yet in terms of the implementation, but it does give us a good basis for hope. So we're continuing to press forward because we think in the plan, in the America the Beautiful plan, and as it's been outlined, and as the principles have been outlined, there's a great deal for us to want in there. And we seem to be occupying a lot of the field. So let's continue to do that, and let's push forward down the field and see if we can score some more conservation wins. Sarah, please feel free to give me the hook anytime you'd like me to sit down. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but in terms of, thank you very much. A couple of the other basic things that are really important to us or that we're focused on in Washington are the Sport Fish Reauthorization Program, also the Magnuson-Stevenson Reauthorization, wildlife crossings, also wildlife corridors, a program that was begun under the previous administration and has really been embraced. We've had some conversations with folks at Interior and also with folks at Ag, which we've been trying to move forward really since 2018 or so. And the folks occupying the chairs in the new administration are seem to be very keen and very interested in not only continuing the wildlife corridors program, but also expanding it. I should say, as an aside, one of the most important elements of our work in Washington is really our ability to work and, excuse me, to communicate and to work with the folks that at the sub-cabinet levels at the Departments of Agriculture and Interior, and we're pretty positively encouraged by what we're seeing there. Certainly, Secretary Vilsack is a known quantity and is somebody that we've worked with successfully in the past. And Secretary Holland is largely an unknown quantity, I would say, at this stage. but the people that she has chosen to surround herself with in the department are people that are folks that we know, and folks that we know also understand, for lack of a better expression, the way things work, the way things really work. So Robert Bonnie's over at Agriculture. We have Martha Williams, former director of Montana Fish and Game, at Fish and Wildlife, and Nada Culver. She was from Audubon. But these are all folks that we know well, and we know they understand our issues. They may not agree with us on all things, but they understand our issues, and they understand, more importantly, that they are important and why they're important. So that's encouraging for us. On the Hill, I would say sort of our focus now really is what's going to happen with kind of the three competing elements of the transportation and infrastructure bill. And the three competing elements essentially are the highway bill. The transportation and infrastructure bill that was introduced by the Biden administration, and then there is or will be shortly a Republican answer to the transportation and infrastructure package. And the big question will be how many different parts that we care about are going to wind up getting bundled into that. It could be that Raleigh winds up being part of the transportation and infrastructure bill. Don't know that yet. There are still too many parts in the moving. But certainly we're hopeful that Sportfish reauthorization and also Magnuson-Stevenson reauthorization can be in there. We're very hopeful that wildlife corridors will be in there. Wildlife crossings will be in there. That's a part, traditional hard infrastructure aspect. Also, water quality and coastal restoration is something that we think is likely to be in there. So that's trying to help move those pieces around so that includes as much as many things that are important to the work that you all do and that we care about are included as sort of a focus of our efforts. At the federal level. We've also been very encouraged by the folks that we've seen at CEQ, which is playing a much more, I guess I'd call it a more typical centralized function than it has in the past in terms of coordinating agency action. We've had good interaction with them. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about just how coherent our community is. In terms of presentation of our issues and in terms of being able to communicate clearly our asks and why we're making them and why they're important and why they're useful. So that's been encouraging also. Notwithstanding all of the other gale force winds that surround the other issues that are that we read about on a daily basis. Just if I could quickly, I'll touch on some of our work at the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation at the regional and state level. Again, here, partnerships are key, as you all know, and we are strong supporters and want to be the strongest possible partner here regionally and specifically with the Missouri Department of Conservation. As you may know, our Senior Director of Policy, who also oversees our agriculture policy, is a former employee of the Missouri Department of Conservation, Ken Keene. So he is closely attuned to the Commission. We very much look to the Commission to set direction and to help us see the guideposts and the mile markers as we work to communicate those concerns and also those priorities to the state legislature and the members of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus in the Missouri State Legislature. So one thing that I'll note on a regional level is that we've seen in the southwestern states or the south midwestern states, we have seen an increase in legislation introduced that's meant to weaken authority of fish and game commissions and wildlife commissions. That's a real concern to us, and as it is no doubt to you all too. So that's something we'll continue to work on. Something that we're also happy to work with you on and to move forward to make sure that those efforts are not successful. I guess at the state level, I would say our priority thus far this year has really been the Prescribed Burn Act. So we have been, we've been making the rounds with the Sportsman's Caucus here in Missouri, trying to help educate them and support that. We have, our representative Kent Keene has been testifying before the legislature. He testified in support of your bear season, opening the bear season. And I think he's, well, I'll leave it at that, I think, but do know that our partnership with you is incredibly important to us. We look to you. We look to you to take our cues and to follow the milestones to set our priorities. We want to understand what your priorities are. We want to understand what your concerns are, and we look to, and we want to make sure always that that's a two-way street. That you hear from us what else is happening, because we know that helps inform your decisions too. So I would say, as chairman of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, I want to thank you for all that you do here in Missouri, leading the way into 21st century conservation, and for your partnership on a daily basis. So thank you all for having me here again today, and I look forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for being here. Can you hear okay in the back of the room? Okay, I just want to be sure. Next agenda item is the consent calendar. And for those of you that are not familiar with that, in order to speed the meeting up, we have certain items that are on what we call the consent calendar. Any item that is removed is taken up at the end of this meeting. But at this point in time, I would call for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
Motion made, second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion carries. Mike, you're up with your regs report, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Director Paul, and Mike. The Regulations Committee met on April 13th to consider a series of recommendations related to the upcoming fall deer and turkey hunting seasons. A copy of each proposed rulemaking is included in your packet. Mr. Chairman, before I begin my formal report, recall that earlier this year, the Commission voted to approve a series of recommendations for regulation changes identified by the Regulations Committee during its annual review of the Wildlife Code. Those changes will remove the peregrine falcon from the state endangered species list and allow master falconers to take and possess wild passage peregrine falcons for use in falconry, allow heads from deer harvested in CWD management zone to be delivered to disease surveillance sampling stations within 48 hours of exit from the county of harvest, modify the required size of properties for landowners to enroll in the chronic wasting disease management program from 20 to 5 acres, and reestablish the seasons, methods, and limits for taking common carp and grass carp, allow their use as live bait, and remove them from the invasive fish definition, to name a few. Following the Commission's initial consideration in January, those proposed rulemakings were filed with the Secretary of State's office and published in the Missouri Register, which initiated a 30-day public comment period. From March 2nd through March 31st, the Department received input on 7 of the 14 proposed rulemakings. A summary of input received, along with staff responses, are included in final orders of rulemaking provided in your Commission packet beginning on page 4. This presentation of orders of rulemaking as formal Commission action items signifies the final step in the Department's regulation process. The Commission has the authority to adopt as originally written, amend, or withdraw the proposed regulations. If approved today, these changes will become effective on August 30th of this year. Mr. Chairman, unless the Commission has any questions or concerns, I request approval of the final orders of rulemaking for 3 CSR 10-4.111, endangered species, 10-4.135, transportation, 10-6.550, other fish, 10.6.605, live bait, 10-7.439, deer, chronic wasting disease management program, permit availability, methods and limits, 10-9.442 falconry, 10-10.725 commercial fishing seasons methods, 10-10.739 fish utilization permit, 10-10.744 commercial game processing permit privilege requirements, 10-10.767 taxidermy, tanning permit privileges requirements, 10-11.186 waterfowl hunting, 10-12.109 closed hours, 10-12.110 use of boats and motors, and 3 CSR 10-20.805 definitions, with no changes to the original recommendations.
Fellow Commissioners, you have heard the report and recommendation of the Regs Committee. May I please have a motion to that effect?
So moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carried. Oh, you have a question?
Just a question, and some of these numbers are kind of run together, like CSR 10-7435, special matters, harvest provisions on animal point restrictions. Does that fall under this vote, or is that an area for discussion here?
For animal point restrictions in the counties, that'll go into the CWD mansions, and that will come in here in a few minutes, Mike.
That'll come up later?
That'll come up later.
Okay, that's where I have a question. I just want to make sure I get a chance to
Yeah.
look at it.
No, we're not going to do
Okay, remind me when you get to that, so I can ask questions.
that. Okay, I'll try to remember.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I apologize to Steve. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion carried. We may continue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, you may also recall that in January, the Commission voted to approve a series of recommendations for regulation changes to Chapter 9 of the Wildlife Code related to confined wildlife. Those proposed rulemakings were also filed with the Secretary of State, published in the Missouri Register, and open for a 30-day public comment period. While no official public comments were received, the Department continued to work in partnership with various stakeholders in anticipation of implementation of these regulations. Due to these conversations and additional internal review, the Department staff recommended minor modifications to 3 of the 20 proposed rulemakings to improve clarity and facilitate understanding of compliance with these rules. These staff comments, along with specific explanations of recommended changes, are included in the final rulemaking provided in your Commission packet on pages 29 to 30, 32 to 33, and 38 to 40. Briefly, recommended changes to the proposed regulations include adding language to 3 CSR 9.354, privileges of Class 3 wildlife breeders, to clarify animal identification devices and clarify the minimum CWD samples required of breeders. Reordering the sections of 3 CSR 10-9.360 to improve clarity and flow, and making editorial changes to this rule to clarify herd records must be kept up to date and include all unique identification numbers. And amend 3 CSR 10-9.565 licensed hunting preserve privileges to clarify that big game hunting preserves comply with only a portion of the same animal identification requirements as breeders. If approved today, all the changes in Chapter 9 will be effective on August 30th of this year. Mr. Chairman, unless the Commission has any questions or concerns, I request approval of final orders rulemaking for, strap in, and we go again, 3 CSR 10-9.105 general provisions, 10-9.110 general prohibition applications, 10-9.220 wildlife confinement standards, 10-9.223 wildlife movement certification requirements, 10-9.230 class 1 wildlife, 10-9.240 class 2 wildlife, 10-9.250 class 3 wildlife, 10-9.350 class 1 wildlife breeder permit, 10-9.351 class 2 wildlife breeder permit, 10-9.352 class 3 wildlife breeder permit, 10-9.353 privileges of class 1 and class 2 wildlife breeders, 10-9.354 privileges of class 3 breeders, 10-9.359 1 and Class 2 wildlife breeders, records required. 10-9.360, Class 3 wildlife breeders, inventory and records required. 10-9.370, wildlife exhibitor permit. 10-9.371, wildlife exhibitor privileges. 10-9.372, wildlife exhibitor permit, records required. 10-9.560, licensed hunting preserve permit. 10-9.565, licensed hunting preserve privileges. And 10-9.566, licensed hunting preserves, records required, with no changes to the original recommendations, and approval of 3 CSR 10-9.354, privileges of Class 3 wildlife breeders, 3 CSR 10-9.360, Class 3 wildlife breeders, inventory and records required, and 3 CSR 10-9.565, licensed hunting preserve privileges with the revisions that I provided earlier for clarification.
You want to go back through all those?
Yeah, I can start over again if you prefer, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Commissioners, can I get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Steve, please.
Just wanted to say a couple of comments. Really appreciate you guys working with those groups. I mean, and Jason, I know you're back here. You've done a tremendous amount of work on turning the local policy to spin on that. And I know that's pretty challenging for you, and really appreciate it.
And I'd like to add to that our state wildlife vet has also spent a considerable amount of time working with those groups, as well as our protection branch chief, Randy Dolan. They've all participated and done an incredible job at establishing a more open lines of communication with some of our partners that are in the confined wildlife business.
Really appreciate it. That you wrote very earlier. That didn't just happen overnight. There's a lot of and again, it's some things about
Well done.
Motion's on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you go on, I want to echo the comment that Steve made. And I think the clarification to everyone. This is not something that just all of a sudden popped up today that we're voting on this, because there's been a lot of discussion on each one of these to get to the point of today. So just as a matter of clarification, thank you for all the work that you and the rest of it. You may continue, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll move on to my formal report. As you'll recall, in December of 2020, the Commission voted to set dates for each portion of the 2021-2022 deer season to allow hunters as much time as possible to prepare for the following year's season, this upcoming deer season this fall. Mr. Chairman, before I move forward with today's action items regarding deer season, it's my privilege to introduce Jason Isbell. Jason holds a bachelor's degree in environmental and forest biology from the State University of New York and a master's degree in forestry and wildlife management from Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas. In 2010, Jason joined the department as our state's turkey and ruffed grouse biologist. During spring of 2019, Jason was promoted to his current role as Service Program Supervisor, where he oversees management of Missouri's deer and elk populations. Today, Jason is going to present regulation recommendations for the 2021-2022 deer hunting season. And with that, Jason, I'll turn the podium over to you.
Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the Commission. Good morning, Director Pauly. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. While we wait for the first slide to pop up, I just want to start by thanking, there's a lot of folks in the agency that put a lot of work into this presentation that I'm going to give this morning. Certainly my staff, Kevin Wiskirkin and Aaron Hildreth, our deer program assistants, Ashley McCullough and Lindsay Bueller, Jasmine Batten, our wildlife health program supervisor and her staff, lots of other staff throughout the agency, particularly our folks that sit on our survey regulations task force. And a special thank you to Mr. Joel Porat for coordinating the conservation area regulations and managed hunt portion of the presentation. So certainly a big team effort, and I appreciate everybody's involvement in this process. This is a brief outline of what I'm going to cover. I'm going to start with just one quick slide about the deer regulations process, talk a little bit about the types of information that we use to formulate our recommendations, a brief recap of last year's deer season. I'll provide an update about CWD, and then we'll get into the recommendations for the upcoming deer season. So we use a lot of data to formulate these recommendations, some of it biological, some of it social, and we merge the two to formulate our recommendations. In terms of biological information, we obviously have harvest data that we obtain from hunters as they check their deer. We have agent harvest data that we work with processors or meat taxidermists to collect information that we can use to input into our population models in order to estimate abundance. We also have a variety of indices that we can use to track trends in deer populations. Disease surveillance and monitoring, obviously critical. I'll touch on that during the presentation, particularly in terms of chronic wasting disease. But the social component is very, very important as well, and we survey a lot of hunters and landowners annually to obtain their opinions on not only our regulations, but the status of the population. How do they feel about deer numbers in the area where their production ground occurs or where they hunt? We also have an archery survey specifically. We have a firearms survey. I talked about the landowner survey. We obtain a variety of other input from our stakeholders throughout the year, additional input coming from our staff. Those get brought to 2 meetings of our internal survey regulations task force, and the recommendations that come out of that task force are brought to the regulations committee. We had a good deer season last year. What I have here is broken down 2019 versus 2020 in terms of the various portions of our deer season. The bulk of our harvest occurs during the November portion. We were slightly down last year. A big reason for that, if you recall, opening weekend last year, it was very wet and very windy. And 50% of that November portion harvest usually occurs in those first 2 days. So that wasn't a big surprise to us. In terms of our archery season harvest, a new archery season record, it was up 10% from where we were a year ago. Alternative methods was up considerably. The shorter portions tend to be a little bit more dynamic given the shorter window and the effects of weather. We were down during the early youth, but up during the late youth portion, and up considerably during the antlerless portion as well. If we break it down, total firearms and total harvest, we were up 2%, 4% respectively compared to where we were a year ago. This graph shows our statewide deer harvest going back to the mid-1990s. You see the record harvest in the mid-2000s. We were aggressively harvesting antlerless deer at that period in time. We had in a lot of counties an overabundance of deer. That population subsequently declined following the regulation changes that we had in place. 2012, we had that extreme drought. We had a bad hemorrhagic disease outbreak in our herd, and it really took its toll on deer numbers in a lot of our counties, and that's why you see that big drop in harvest in 2013. Following that, we became more conservative with our regulations to allow the population to bounce back, and it certainly has, as you can see from the harvest graph, the increasing trend since 2013. This map shows a county-level assessment of deer population status in terms of, and you can see the various colors there, from all the way from the too few in the cold colors all the way to too many in the more hot colors, the reds and orange. As you can see from the map, the vast majority of our counties are at objective in terms of population status. We feel like we have the right number of deer in the vast majority of our counters, and that's based on that social data that I talked about earlier. The input we get from our hunters and the input we get from our landowners. In terms of population trends, we have stable to increasing deer populations in most of our counties. And so the reds that you see are increasing, the orange are stable to increasing. And so we're at a period in time where our populations are right where they want to be, but our deer numbers are increasing in a lot of our counties. And so our overall broad goal is to stabilize deer numbers in most of our counties. We do that by increasing antlerless harvest. As Dr. Hubbard indicated, when the season portions were brought forward to the commission in December, we extended the antlerless portion from 3 days to 9 days, and that'll help. But we also have some county-level antlerless liberalizations that I'll propose in here in the coming slides in order to keep that population at that socially acceptable level. CWD update, and the director touched on a bit of this already. The number of deer that we tested was down considerably from where we were a year ago, and the reason for that is because mandatory sampling requirements were rescinded last year due to COVID-19 concerns. And so we still sample over 15,000 deer, which is a considerable number of deer. And I want to again thank Jasmine Batten and her team for a lot of the work that they do on this front. Most of those, of course, being hunter harvested deer, 2,700 roughly due to targeted culling, 284 sick, roadkill, and other. As the director mentioned, 44 positives, most of those being hunter harvested, although 18 of those did come from our targeted culling efforts that occurred after deer season. As the director mentioned, 2 new counties. We see Pulaski County with the arrow in the southern portion of the map, 1 positive there, and then up in the northern part of the state with the arrow. In southwestern Putnam County, we had 2 positives there. Last year was also the first year that we piloted a freezer head drop program coordinated by our wildlife health folks, and in each county in the CW management zone, they essentially had a self-service freezer head drop where a hunter, no matter what day of the season, could simply go and drop off their head. So it provided them with one more way to have their deer tested for the disease. Despite challenges, our surveillance and management efforts occurred, and I would say we're certainly successful last year. CWD is still rare in our state. We've had 206 positives. That's out of over 180,000 that we've sampled to date, and over 152,000 of those since 2012 when we first detected the disease. I mentioned the 2 new county detections in Putnam and also in Pulaski. We're seeing some local spread in some of our core areas, but by and large the information that we have now suggests that our management efforts have been successful at keeping that prevalence rate low, or the percentage of the population that has the disease. We continue to look critically at our surveillance and management efforts and try to improve those as we go through time. We've got several research projects that we're initiating to help us in terms of looking at our approach to management and making sure that we are being as effective as we possibly can at managing this disease. And preparations for the upcoming surveillance year are well underway at this point. Now we'll get into the formal recommendations. Our first recommendation is to allow a firearms antlers permit to be used in Reynolds and Stoddard counties, and those are the 2 counties that you see with the star. We'll follow that convention as I move through the subsequent slides. Counties in the southeastern part of the state have among the most conservative regulations that we have. In terms of Reynolds and Stoddard, the deer population is increasing. The data we have from our stakeholders indicates that the population is right where we want it to be. And so allowing a firearms antlers permit should help to slow population growth and stabilize numbers in those counties. Our second recommendation is to increase firearms antlers permits from 1 to 2 in the 17 counties that you see with stars, and those are Camden, Cape Girardeau, and Davies. Harrison, Howard, and Johnson, Laclede, Lafayette, and Lawrence, Newton, Pettis, and Pulaski, Ripley, Saline, and Webster, Worth, and Wright counties. And that's for several different reasons that I'll go through in the subsequent slides. Some due to CWD management, the counties proposed being added to the zone, others that are above objective, and others that have increasing populations that we'd like to stabilize. So now we'll go through those 17. First, Camden and Laclede and Pulaski. We're recommending that these 3 counties enter the CWD management zone. And so as standard practice, when we have counties that enter the zone, we recommend an increase in antlerless harvest to try to prevent further population increase, because we know that CWD is at least a partially density-dependent disease. In terms of Howard in central Missouri and Worth up in northwest Missouri, based on the social data we've collected, indicate that deer numbers are above objective in these 2 counties, and so we propose adding that antlerless permit to try to lower populations back to socially acceptable levels. In terms of the rest of the 12 counties that you see here in stars, all of these exist at socially acceptable levels currently, but they're increasing in some counties fairly rapidly. And so we propose to add that second firearms antlers permit to slow population growth and again try to stabilize those populations. Our third recommendation is to increase resident landowner firearms antlers permits in the 6 counties that you see with stars, and those are Dent, Douglas, and Marys, Phelps, Texas, and Wright. You can see that most counties of the state that are shaded in gray already allow landowners with qualifying acreage to fill 2 landowner firearms antlers permits. Our recommendation here is we've got increasing population in these counties, offer that second landowner antlers permit to give those landowners the extra flexibility that they need to manage deer on their properties. Our fourth recommendation is to add Camden, Laclede, and Pulaski counties, and also McDonald counties for our CWD management zone. With the addition of these counties, it would bring the total to 34. The 3 counties that are clustered, Pulaski, Camden, and Laclede, are due to a positive detection that I mentioned earlier in western Pulaski County. Camden and Laclede happen to be within 10 miles of that positive in Pulaski, and that's why we're recommending their inclusion. And then there was a detection in the northern part of Benton County, Arkansas, that's within 10 miles of McDonald County, Missouri, and that's why we're recommending that McDonald County be added as well. As a reminder, any of the counties that are within the CWD management zone have a feeding and mineral supplementation ban for deer. Our fifth recommendation is to require hunters in those 34 counties that were on the previous map to take their deer to a mandatory sampling station on opening weekend of the November portion of firearms, which this year falls on the 13th and 14th of November. It's a really important effort. It allows us to collect, during most years, 20,000 samples in a 2-day window, so it's really efficient in terms of what we can get. Gives us a great idea of the distribution of the disease within those counties. Our sixth recommendation is to expand the Deer Management Systems Program to the all Northwest region counties, all Kansas City, and all Southwest region counties, and to pilot it in select counties in the Northeast region, St. Louis region, and Ozark, those being Clark, Pike, and Putnam, Denton, Howland, Oregon, Franklin, Lincoln, St. Charles, and Warren. Recall this is a program that we initiated to allow qualifying landowners with qualifying acreage to obtain additional firearms ambulance permits above and beyond what the county level allows them to. So it's a really effective program, especially for landowners that have large acreages. The county level regulations simply don't allow them to harvest enough deer. They can enroll in this program and obtain more firearms ambulance permits to help them manage their deer populations. It's a program we started a few years ago. We've slowly shifted throughout the state. What we propose here is the 3 counties, 3 regions, Northeast, St. Louis, and Ozark would be the last 3 that we pilot, and our thoughts would be that we'd be able to go statewide during the 2022 deer season. Our 7th recommendation is to rescind the amper point restriction in Camden and Pulaski counties. This is based on a recommendation that these counties are entering the CWD management zone. In any of our counties within the zone, we rescind the amper point restriction because that regulation protects young bucks, which are most likely to disperse from the area where they were born, and if they're infected, potentially spread the disease. And so with Pulaski and Camden, Laclede already didn't have the APR, nor did McDonald, but Pulaski and Camden, we did have the APR, and so our recommendation is to rescind that. Our 8th recommendation is approval for amendments to conservation areas. This year, one of the considerable changes is to refine how we allow managers to decide which antlerless permits can be filled on our conservation areas. So currently, antlerless permits are either allowed or they're not allowed, and that's not specific to archery or firearms, it's just one or the other. Our recommendation this year is to allow the managers flexibility to allow archery and antlerless permits only. And so where this really comes into play is if we have areas that allow statewide regulations and a manager feels that there are enough hunting pressure on the area that allowing that firearms antlerless permit would result in overharvest, allowing them to designate that being an archery antlerless permit only, allows additional opportunity for our hunters on those areas to harvest additional deer, allows the managers to satisfy their goals. It certainly gives more flexibility. As a result of that, we saw a shift in about 15% of our conservation area in terms of the designation of that antlerless permit use on those areas. Our last recommendation is approval of managed hunts for the upcoming deer season. One of our proposals is to change the hunter education requirement for managed hunts. And so previously you had to be hunter education certified to participate in a managed hunt. What we're recommending is that requirement is removed, which would make our managed hunts identical to the way our firearms, the other portions of our firearms deer season. In terms of if a youth wants to hunt, they could obtain a managed deer hunt permit if they weren't hunter certified, but they've got to have that qualified, properly licensed mentor with them, just like they would during any other firearms portion deer season. Similar to an adult, they wouldn't have to be hunter certified, but they would have to obtain the apprentice hunter authorization, then the managed hunt permit, and then hunt in the presence of a licensed and properly qualified mentor. Important to know that when we reached out to our partners, we have a number of managed hunts on partner lands, we gave them the opportunity to decide whether or not they wanted to have that on the particular areas that they managed and offered that flexibility. We also have some new managed hunts that I wanted to touch on briefly at the end here. 5 archery hunts that we're proposing in Cape Girardeau, 2 hunts in the Shaw Nature Reserve, 1 firearms, 1 archery, 3 archery hunts in Faybeck Nature Preserve, and then an archery hunt at James A. Reed Wildlife. That concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Larry has a question, please.
How do you arrive at socially acceptable levels?
Sure. It's a good question. And so what we do is we have our hunter surveys and we have our surveys of production landowners. And one of the questions we ask on both surveys identically is, how do you feel about deer numbers in the area that you hunt, if it's a hunter survey, or that you produce? And we give them a scale from too many to about right, too few, or if they don't know, they can check that box as well. And we look at those percentages every year in every single county. And the way we determine where we are, if we're meeting objective, is that both of those groups, the majority of folks in both of those groups feel that deer numbers are about right.
Question, Mark?
What's happening in Brio in relationship to increasing numbers? Do you have any idea?
So it varies a little bit in those counties. Of course, those counties don't have a whole lot of deer habitat, so deer numbers are low in the extreme southeastern part of our state. Dunklin County is a little bit of an exception, and we're seeing that population increase, but the other counties down there, the population is generally fairly stable. Deer numbers are pretty low there, so we tend to see our harvest numbers be kind of erratic just due to small sample sizes. But in general, there's just not a lot of habitat, and obviously those areas are prone to flood, and sometimes, depending on the timing of that flood, can impact populations as well.
Steve?
Yeah, I have several questions. We're rescinding the 4-point rule as a recommendation in Pulaski County and Camden County, right?
Yes.
How long has that 4-point rule been in place then?
Oh, I'd have to look that up for you, Commissioner Harrison. I can't remember off the top of my head how long we've had those in those two counties.
2008.
Thank you, Jason.
2008. Well, and there's just one positive there that would, justify changing that restriction, something we've had there for 12, 13 years. I mean, and I guess the reason it's kind of on my radar, I saw a cattle last week, and one of the guys went, how come we want a 4-point rule in Texas County? When I was a kid, my desire to kill a deer was just, I just want to shoot a deer. As you know, that's changed quite a bit, and trophy management, I get a little cautious when I use that terminology, but a better structure of age class, is really what you're looking for. And, our mature bucks would see something that we've worked hard for a long time to try to develop a more structured age class, to immediately get rid of it over one positive. It seemed like maybe we would say, okay, let's take a 10-mile radius and do some target culling to see if there's really a problem before we undo that. That's just kind of a general question. I just have a hard time putting those 3 counties into a CWD management zone and rescinding a 4-point rule over one policy. It just seems just a little bit premature in my mind. And, kind of to add to that, the CWD management is, being on this mission, I haven't paid much attention to it until now, but I start looking at what adjacent states and how they manage it, and it's like there's not any consensus. You would think from a biological standpoint there would be some consensus of, Iowa would do the same thing in Kansas, and some states almost ignore it and some states don't. And it's just hard to get your head around the scientific basis of what justifies it. But back to what I said earlier, to make all those changes for something we worked for 12 years for a better over one positive, I really struggle with that. And I'd like to hear your thoughts and input on it, and sincerely appreciate it too.
Sure. No, I think our approach is out of an abundance of caution. It is one positive. We conducted targeted culling in the Pulaski Corps, didn't find any additional positives. But given the gravity of the situation, the seriousness of the disease, in my opinion, I would rather operate out of abundance of caution and do it right away rather than wait and take a chance of a young buck in that area dispersing to a new area. We know they can go over considerable miles when they disperse and potentially spreading the disease into a new area. So I think it's a conservative approach, and I think it's justified just given the seriousness of the disease and the potential spread.
So, my hearing sometimes not as good as it should be, but you've already done targeted
Just this first year, yes, we did in the Pulaski Corps.
How many animals were targeted calling that still?
About 150.
Within what radius of that policy?
So it's a 25 square mile area.
Is this the same criteria that you've used all along? In other words, if you have one animal who comes up positive, then so you're being consistent with the way that you determine when you can put these things in place.
Yes, the approach has been consistent. This is not a change from previous years. Correct.
Just, I mean, if I remember, then correct me, but I thought some of the CWD managers owned the trunk stop. Isn't that correct? But then when we were calling with 3 counties added to it, I mean, over one, I mean, particularly part of that targeted culling, the next thing you know, we're going to have more of those counties are going to be CWD management areas, and the things that the public has expressed that they want a larger distribution of H class, we're going to undo that. I mean, that's the reason I struggle with it, you know.
Yeah, in terms of shrinking the zone, that was a decision that we made based on some of the research that we had. So when we established our first zone, it was a 25-mile radius from a positive, and that was based on research that had been done elsewhere that suggested that was the dispersal distance of deer in the Midwest, and obviously it was in the case of the study areas where we used the data. We had the large-scale research project that we conducted that found that the vast majority of our deer are dispersing within 10 miles. So that's why the zone, the number of counties was reduced, because we went from that 25-mile radius down to 10. So any of those counties that are on that periphery left the zone. Excuse me. And so now our criteria, as I mentioned, for Camden and Pulaski, both being within that 10-mile radius. So we've been able to refine that, which reduces the amount of counties that are in the zone, which obviously a good thing for our hunters, and it's a good thing because it's based on data from our own state data that we have from radio collared deer here in Missouri, and so that's why that reduction occurred. We also had the situation where we had the positive in Cole County, and we'd done surveillance for 3 years at that point and had not detected any positives, and the counties that were around that positive were removed from the zone at that point in time. So both of those reasons were why we saw that shrinking of the zone.
Okay, so just so I understand this, you know, you're saying the average dispersal will be under 10 miles. And so we did target culling within 10 miles of 150 animals, so one positive, and got no more additional positives. We're still wanting to rescind the 4-point rule and make 3 counties into CWD management zone. Is that correct?
So we didn't do the culling throughout that 10-mile radius. We did it within a much smaller geography, that core area, where we do the culling in the section where the positive was, and then we go out 2 sections from that. So it's a much more targeted approach than within that 10-mile radius. And so we went in the first year, we found the positive in Pulaski this past fall, worked with landowners to get permission to go in this winter after the season ended and removed about 150 deer within that core. Didn't find any additional positives. But because we had that positive in Pulaski, again, as an abundance of caution, we recommended that county and Camden, the APR be removed. And I certainly understand the motivation, you know, for hunters and the desire for them for an older age class buck. And if you look on that map, it's important to realize too, a lot of the counties in the southern part of the state don't have the APR, and that's not necessarily, a lot of those, it's not necessarily from a disease management standpoint. It's on the hunter surveys that I mentioned. One of the questions we ask them periodically is, would you support the APR in the county that you hunt most, or do you not? And in the counties in the southern part of their state that don't have it, it's because most of our hunters in those counties are saying we don't want the APR. And so because that motivation to have an older age class bucks, or simply to go out and harvest any deer, we allow those hunters to decide which counties they, unless in the case of these 2 where they enter the CWD management zone, we feel that the threat to the deer population is great enough that we feel the responsible thing to do would be to rescind it.
I think the main thing was stated by Commissioner Horsley is that we were being consistent. When you find one, this is what happens. I think you've done an outstanding job controlling this. You know, it could be devastating at this point. I commend you on your efforts in the department. What I'd like for you to do, if you would be to please stay up here while I continues, because this is a motion dealing with that very issue. Mike, you will come up,
Thank you.
let him pick it up if you stay.
And I would like to address some of those concerns briefly too, Commissioner Washington. As you know, when the CWD is first found in an area, it's very, very low prevalence. And when we find it, we do, out of the abundance of caution, take the most aggressive action we feel that we can. Even though we took 150 animals out of that area right now, it's a relatively small number of animals with looking for a disease that's relatively rare. And as you know, CWD test results come back not positive or negative, but detect or do not detect. So those early stages of disease, it's also possible that we could be removing animals out of that area that are positive, but don't have enough prions to pop as a positive on our tests. So we approach that as aggressively as possible early on. If I remember correctly, in Adair County, once we found it the first year that we went in looking, we didn't find it again. But subsequent years, we started to find it. Cole County, where we went in and went aggressive as soon as we found one, we were lucky enough not to find another positive in that area after over 900 samples in the first 3 years, not counting what we acquired through opening weekend. That was our targeted sample for 3 years in that area. And we reverted back to regulations that we had prior to the discovery of that and backed out of that CWD core zone in that Montauk coal area. And knock on wood, to date, we have not found another positive. So it's a real question about not just is the disease there, but are we able to get lucky and knock out the 2 or 3 that may be harboring the disease, but not yet to a point where our current tests would find the prions that those individuals could have. So that's part of the reason why once we find it, we try everything we can to try to make sure that if there's any chance of us getting it off the landscape, that we do it immediately. Because we know that once it's established, we'll never do it off the landscape. I think once we find 2 CWD positives, we move from sampling and looking for the disease to targeted culling because we know that we have an established disease in that location. So that's part of our rationale for the approach that we've always used and I would propose as we progress. So,
well, I mean, just a couple comments anyway, but I mean, there's some statistical modeling you can do on that, or if you're looking at the total estimated animal population and you have a number of animals that you target, you get a confidence level of, p-value of 0.01 or 0.05. You can present some numbers like that. And not that I want to disagree with Don, but just because I've always done something in a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way, particularly when I look at adjacent states that are doing it, and I know how much the public opinion has changed. I mean, when I was a kid, just to kill a deer that was an accomplishment. But I mean, our opinions, you get 10-year-old kids that will tell me they passed $1 $9 And I guess where I have a hard time getting my head around it, Mike, is if we did a targeted culling in a 10-mile radius and still got no more positives, to change that whole rule for 3 counties and 4 point that we worked on for 12 years, I mean, I really struggle with that.
I understand, and I know our sportsmen are concerned about that too. But this is a trade-off between gambling that you have it and gambling that you don't. If we lose the gamble, we've got it, and we're always going to have it. There's no coming back from that.
Sure, I understand that, but I mean, target the 10-mile radius for an additional year before you make that big change for 3 counties.
But then we're also allowing that disease another year to continue to progress without us doing the maximum amount of effort to remove it. And as far as the statistical sampling, it's been a while since I can, so Jason, you may have to jump in here, but on a 10-mile circle, we have done that very analysis, and we tried it. We would like to have a sample of approximately 300 deer out of that 10-mile area to give us a 95% confidence that it's not more than 1% prevalence, but 1%, anything less than 1%, which is what you're going to have with a newly established disease, we're not real confident. And when you want to bump that up to 99%, that sample size jumps dramatically. almost beyond our ability to do it. So
Mike,
that's how it is.
as much as this conversation is good, this point is specific. What I would like for you to do is to continue with your report. We'll take each one of those up on a separate motion, please.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
then we'll get time to discuss each one of them.
Okay,
Thank you.
and I will do that one at a time then for these first four.
Thank you.
Included in your packet, Commissioners, are 4 orders of rulemaking that modify limits for antlerless deer, rescind the 4-point antler restriction in 2 counties, and expand the Deer Management Assistance Program. If approved, these changes will be effective July 1st of this year. The action items are as follows, and this will all take them one at a time instead of all 4. A proposed change to 10-7.434 deer landowner privileges would increase availability of resident landowner firearms antlerless permit hunting permits in Kent, Douglas, Marys, Phelps, Texas, and Wright counties from 1 to 2.
May I have a motion to approve that, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. You may continue, sir.
7.435 deer special harvest provisions would rescind the antler point restriction in Camden and Pulaski counties.
May I have a motion to approve that?
So moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed?
Aye. 2 ayes, 1 opposed.
Okay. Let that record show, please. Next, please.
7.437 deer, antlerless deer hunting permit availability would increase availability of firearms antlerless permits in Reynolds and Stoddard counties from 0 to 1, and increase availability of firearms antlerless permits in Camden, Cape Girardeau, Davies, Harrison, Howard, Johnson, Laclede, Lafayette, Lawrence, Newton, Pettis, Pulaski, Ripley, Saline, Webster, Worth, and Wright counties from 1 to 2.
I have a motion to approve that. Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion carries.
The final order of rulemaking for 7.600 Deer Management Assistance Program expands the Deer Management Assistance Program, or DMAP, to include all Kansas City, Northwest, and Southwest region counties, and pilot the program in select Northeast, Ozark, and St. Louis region counties.
May I have a motion to approve this, please?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, all. Any discussion? Yes, please.
On the DMAP program, we've talked about that, I'm real positive about that. A couple of questions. I mean, why isn't that throughout the state? What's your guys' thought process on this?
We have been moving, and I could let Jason answer, but we've been moving through the state by regions to pilot it, so basically so our staff can get up to speed and make sure that they know what they're doing and how to do it properly. And it's really been primarily just getting our staff up to speed on it before we overwhelm them with an entirely new program that can take a significant amount of staff time and effort. And so we've been working our way progressively through the state, and this will be the last year where we have any pilots. And as Jason said earlier, hopefully at this time next year, I'm asking the commission to do it statewide. So that's the primary reason that we've been methodically working our way through to work the kinks out, get our staff on board, make sure they know how it works, and then start engaging our landowners and public.
The second question I had on that, the DMAP program is limited to a minimum of 500 acres, I believe.
In our rural areas, yes, it's different in our urban cores.
Oh, so there is some variability from
Yes,
parts of the
in
state.
the urban areas, it's 40 acres if you can, of land. It doesn't matter how many landowners. If you can get 40 acres together, then you can participate in DMAP.
And we've discussed this, and I've expressed concerns on it. You know, I mean, to some extent, it makes it sound like the landowner in a rural area then is not as important as the bigger landowner area. And of course, when we discussed it, said, well, you know, mutual landowners and get together and that sort of thing. Well, one of my friends that lives in Gander County, we were talking about that intensely managed deer, well, he owns 120 acres. Everybody else thinks he has too many deer. Well, he has all the food, so he ends up with more deer than he wants. But he didn't have any way to manage it. And it's real frustrating. I mean, it's really frustrating for him. And, I wish there was a better way to manage that.
Well, and that's one of those things that as we get the program up and running and we take a look at just the overall demands of the program, that we could easily look to tweak that to a smaller acreage, which I think is our intent. Just to be quite honest, we didn't know how much demand we were going to have. And the smaller those land acreages, the more of it we're going to get and the more time it will take. And it's not that we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we can service those landowners when we roll it out and not make promises we can't keep it.
In a perfect world, it's great when we all get along, but adjacent landowners typically.
Right. And it's important to remember that they don't have to be adjacent. They just need to be in relative proximity.
Is that it?
Yes.
We're going to take about a 15-minute break, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you. Mike, we're going to go back and go our motion on that DMAP. May I have a motion to approve it? Moved and, is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Please continue.
Commissioners, as the next action item, staff recommend adding Camden, Laclede, McDonald, and Pulaski counties to the CWD management zone. The addition of Pulaski, Camden, and Laclede counties is due to detection of CWD in Pulaski County, while the addition of McDonald County is due to the detection of CWD positive deer in northern Benton County, Arkansas, within 10 miles of McDonald County, Missouri. With the additions of these counties, the recommendation presented for your approval today calls for mandatory sampling in 34 counties during the opening weekend of the fall firearms deer season, November 13th and 14th. Those counties are Adair, Berry, Camden, Cedar, Sheridan, Christian, Clark, Crawford, Franklin, Gasconade, Hickory, Howell, Jefferson, Knox, Laclede, Lynn, Macon, McDonald, Mercer, Oregon, Ozark, Perry, Polk, Pulaski, Putnam, St. Charles, St. Clair, St. Francis, St. Genevieve, Stone, Sullivan, Taney, Warren, and Washington. As a reminder, the placement of grain, salt products, minerals, and other consumable natural and manufactured products is not allowed in these counties unless for normal agricultural purposes. I request Commission approval of recommendations to add Camden, Laclede, McDonald, and Pulaski counties to the management zone and to require mandatory sampling of deer taken in 34 management counties during the first weekend of the fall firearms deer season, as shown on page 48 of your packet.
May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Okay.
In the break, I had a chance to talk to Jason. One of the things he told me was actually eased my mind some of this, and just for the other commissioners. I did not know that if we go 3 years with no negatives, that then we reinstitute. I did not know that. And had I known that, I would not have opposed that vote. Just so you know, that's something I think we all need to recognize. So that makes a pretty good scientific evidence to support that. And I appreciate the comments and give me the insight on it.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I should have explained that better. But in Cole and Onatoga, we pulled them out of the zone, and both of those are back in the animal point restriction.
My perception of it was, once it's there, it's like almost impossible to go back. But we have a mechanism in place to put it back in.
Absolutely.
That makes more sense.
Before I take Mark's question, Steve, would you like to recall that vote?
Yes.
To show the record that you support so made. Please show that. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I've got a question. I know that on this opening weekend of mandatory sampling, which of course we have priority of 30 counties, but that's kind of all hands on deck resources.
Yes, sir. Luckily, we have become much more efficient than we were the first few years we did it, when it was just about all hands on deck during that open weekend. Now, we still have close to or slightly over 500 individuals who will be involved in that activity. But that does leave about probably 40% of our staff to rotate around and not have to work open weekend deer season.
So the quick answer to the question is, can we handle 34 counties?
Yes. Can we handle 44 counties? That would be a different question.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the final action items for the 2021-2022 season. I'm sorry. There was no vote taken.
Did you want to vote on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how about a motion?
So move on.
I thought we didn't
Second.
Oh, okay, all right, I would say aye. Thank you. You may continue. Thank you,
Thank you, Nicole.
Nicole.
The final action item for the 2021-22 season will establish fall deer and turkey hunting regulations on conservation areas and managed hunts. To assist conservation area staff and manage deer populations, we are recommending managers be permitted to choose among 3 options pertaining to the use of antlerless permits. As Jason described earlier, the first would be antlerless permits would be allowed on the conservation area. The second would be archery antlerless permits only would be allowed in the conservation area. And the third option would be that no antlerless permits are allowed in the conservation area. Conservation area regulations table begins on page 50 of your packet and includes changes as made as a result of these recommendations. The recommendations brought forward today include managed hunts held on properties owned by the Missouri Departments of Conservation, Natural Resources, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the National Park Service. For managed deer hunts conducted on MDC lands, staff recommend removing the requirements that hunter education certification be required for hunters that are ages 11 to 15, as long as they purchase a managed deer hunting permit and hunt in the immediate presence of a properly licensed adult that is hunter ed certified or was born before January 1st of 67. And the second one, ages 16 and older individuals, as long as they purchase an apprentice hunter authorization and a managed deer hunting permit and hunt in the immediate presence of a properly licensed adult that is hunter education certified or born before January 1st of 67. We recommend MDC partners that conduct managed hunts on their lands retain the option of requiring the managed hunt participants to be hunter education certified. A summary of recommended changes to managed hunts is provided in the packet, beginning on page 65. Mr. Chairman, I request Commission approval of these action items as described in the packet.
May the record show that Steve makes that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made, second. Discussion.
Just a question, Mr. Chairman. On the hunter education certificate, I know Jason kind of went through that earlier. Remind me again the rationale behind that.
We're changing our managed hunts to reflect the same rules that we have for the normal deer season. So normally during the deer season, a young person can hunt in the immediate presence, if they're not hunter certified, in the immediate presence of someone who is, or is exempt from the requirements. So we're just translating that over into our managed hunts with the same rules. And then if they're over 16 and still don't have their hunter education certification, we allow folks to purchase for 2 years what is called a apprentice authorization permit. So that says, I'm not sure if I want to hunt or not, but I would like to try it. I'm probably not going to sit through a hunter ed on the first day because I don't know if I like this or not. But I can purchase this and I can hunt in the immediate presence of a hunter education certified adult and figure out if I like it or not. Now we only allow them to do that for 2 years. And we do that specifically because we still do want them to become hunter ed certified, and we don't want people to avoid that requirement indefinitely. So we give them a 2-year window to take a new approach, and that's the way we operate statewide. We're trying to move those same rules into our managed hunt programs on our department areas.
Kind of like a learner permit.
It's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is.
Thank you.
Very good question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, the motion carries. Please go on.
As its final order of business on April 13th, the committee received a report on a periodic rule review. Commissioners recall that a statute passed by the Missouri legislature in 2014 requires each state agency to conduct a thorough review of its regulations every 5 years to determine if those rules remain relevant and necessary. The Department of Conservation was among the first group of agencies to conduct this review in 2015 and has just completed the second review. The Regulations Subcommittee, chaired by Protection Deputy Chief Travis McLean, was tasked to consider the continued relevance of each rule, respond to specific questions outlined in the statute, and review and respond to citizen comment received during the mandatory 60-day public comment period, which was July 2nd through August 31st of 2020. At this time, I'd like to introduce Travis, who will provide a summary of the periodic rule review process and public comments received. Travis currently serves as Deputy Chief of the Protection Branch and is responsible for the south section of the state. He began his career with the department in 1994, working in various hourly positions until he was selected to attend the Conservation Agent Training Academy in 1999. Travis has served as a conservation agent for Polk, Holt, and Berries counties, a protection district supervisor in the Kansas City Metro District, and has worked with Conservation Agent Training Program as the Protection Program Specialist. Travis holds a Juris Doctorate degree from the St. Louis University School of Law, a master's degree in criminal justice from the University of Central Missouri, and a bachelor's degree in wildlife conservation from Northwest Missouri State University. Travis, at this point, the podium is yours.
Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners, Director Polly. Pleasure to speak to you all today about the periodic review. I have a lot of information that Mike just covered as part of my presentation about what it is, but it is required by statute. The legislature enacted it in 2015. They do open up our regulations for a public comment period for 60 days, and that occurred last summer. And we are required to file a periodic review report with the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules by June 30th of this year. And within that report, the statute requires that we evaluate all of our rules, determine if they're necessary, they're obsolete, if there's overlap in the regulation with other state laws or statutes, if there's something less restrictive that might work in the same manner. And also, the final report requires a summary of the comments received and the agency's response to each comment. So for each comment received, we are required to draft a response and include that with the report. Again, notice was published last July, and we received comments for 60 days. The comments were compiled, and the Regulations Subcommittee was tasked with conducting the periodic review. Our Regulations Subcommittee is a working group underneath the Regulations Committee. And what the Regulations Subcommittee does is it reviews all regulations that are substantive before it makes it to the Regulations Committee. And that group is not an approving body, but we're looking and making sure the formatting is proper, that there's consistent language throughout the Wildlife Code, as well as making sure there's not any unintended consequences, because a lot of our regulations are interconnected. So make sure we have dotted our I's and crossed our T's, and just to provide general information to the Regulations Committee. We began our formal review last fall. We reviewed every regulation in the code. We met on a number of occasions and looked at each rule and applied those factors that are required by the statute. And we drafted responses to every comment. We submitted our draft report to the Regulations Committee at their April meeting. And we have completed that report. And while I'm here, I'm not the only one who was involved with this, so I want to take a moment to recognize the members of the committee that assisted with it. It certainly was a significant undertaking because we had 140 comments that we had to draft responses to. So Charles Anderson in Science Branch, Justine Gartner, Mike Mitchell, and Joel Porath in Statewide Resource Management Branch, Lisa Dunham in Protection Branch, Lucas Bond and Matt Seek with Communications Branch, and Greg Collier, Julie Love, and General Counsel Jennifer Frazier with Administration. So to briefly summarize the results of the review by the committee, after considering the factors required by statute, the committee has found, or it's the opinion of the committee, that all rules are still relevant, necessary, and appropriate. Again, we received a total of 140 comments, and they were throughout the entire wildlife code. We had numerous regulations commented on, but some of the common themes, as you might imagine, our most common comments were on our deer hunting regulations, believe it or not, and we received 20 comments requesting changes to the deer hunting regulations. Most of those related to season timing recommendations, folks wanting to use bait to hunt deer, creating a traditional weapons portion, and either some modification to the antler point restriction, either removing it altogether or lowering it to a 3-point restriction. Turkey was the next most common comment received. We received 15 comments to change the turkey hunting regulations. The bulk of those were designed to be more restrictive, is what the requests were. Shorten season dates, reduce limits, or eliminate the harvest of hens in the fall. There were a couple comments asking to move the opener of the spring turkey hunting season to a weekend, or to allow all-day hunting during the regular spring turkey hunting season. We received 14 comments to expand the harvest opportunities for raccoons and other fur bearers. Most of those were expand the season dates, was the general theme of the comments. We also received several comments requesting the Commission consider regulations to allow night vision and thermal imagery equipment for hunting coyotes and other predators. And as you all are probably well aware, the comment period was in June through August, and a regulation did go into effect to allow the use of thermal imagery for hunting coyotes at the conclusion of the archery deer and turkey hunting season. There were 10 comments submitted requesting non-resident permit fees to be increased, and 10 comments expressing concerns with the recent changes to the acreage and application requirements for landowner deer and turkey hunting permits. We received one comment during the process that prompted staff to begin the process of submitting a regulation for consideration. It has to do with the permit exemption for youth anglers to take fish without a permit. So under the current regulation, the regulation allows anglers that are 15 years of age or younger to take fish without a permit anywhere in the state, but there's a restriction on what methods they are allowed to use. They're only exempt from the permit requirements for those methods that are personally attended, like pole and line, bow fishing, or gig. If they would like to use those methods that are not personally attended, like trot lines, throw lines, limb lines, bank lines, jug lines, those methods, then they would be required to obtain a fishing permit. That regulation has been in place for decades, longer than I've been a conservation agent or been with this department. I believe the origins of it are to eliminate permit avoidance by adults. Since that time, regulations have changed substantially, particularly related to the reciprocity with other states on our boundary waters, the Missouri, the Mississippi, the St. Francis, where they can come. Anglers licensed in those states can attach things to the banks in Missouri. So a lot of those incentives for permit avoidance have gone away now. And frankly, the need to introduce youth anglers to the full suite of the methods that are allowed for fishing probably outweighs that risk of people avoiding the permit or limit requirements. So with that said, staff have already begun work to bring forward a recommendation here at mid-year code review to address that comment from the public. And that's an overview of the periodic review, and I'll be happy to take any comments or entertain any questions.
Any questions, commissioners? Thank you, Travis.
Thanks, Travis. Thank you,
Travis.
sir.
I recognize we're a little behind schedule, Mr. Chair, and I'll speed up as much as possible.
Thank you.
Commissioners, your packet contains a copy of the final report Travis just discussed. Unless you members of the commission have any questions on the process or the final report, I'll instruct staff to submit this document to the Joint Committee Administrative Rules of the Small Business Regulatory Fairness Board early next month.
Please do that.
Commissioners, the Regulations Committee has been evaluating a potential proposal to modify paddlefish regulations. These recommendations will be brought forward for your consideration at a future date. Today, I'd like to introduce scientist Sarah Tripp, who is here to provide some background information on this topic. Sarah holds a master's degree from Southern Illinois University in Fisheries Management. She has worked in Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and for the last 9 years here in Missouri. Sarah's work is focused on commercial species and large rivers, including the Mississippi, Missouri, Illinois, Ohio, and Wabash rivers. And unfortunately, we have recently learned that Ms. Tripp has accepted another job at another agency, so we're going to lose her expertise shortly. But before she leaves, we're going to take full advantage of what she knows. So with that, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Welcome, Sarah.
Morning, Sarah.
Thank you, Commissioners, and Director Polly and Hubbard for the very nice introduction. We're lucky in Missouri in that we're one of the few states within the Mississippi River Basin that have a historical, recreational, and commercial fishery. And in Missouri, paddlefish provide a unique fishery on our rivers and reservoirs for our recreational fishers, as well as we also are able to maintain a commercial fishery. So in order to maintain these fisheries, it's kind of a joint effort between the state agencies and federal agencies. So here in Missouri, we have a paddlefish management plan, and our main overall arching goal is to maintain that paddlefish as a statewide trophy fishery. And some specific goals are so that the average weight of those fish harvested are 20 pounds or more. I think it's 20 pounds, 30 pounds or more, 30 pounds or more. And then 20% of those harvested are actually 50 pounds or more. And then on the federal side, we have to, our CITES, which is part of the Fish and Wildlife Service, they actually require that each state demonstrates the sustainability of those river fisheries so that we can continue the international trade of paddlefish, flesh, and roe within our states. And so in order to evaluate whether we are meeting our goals and the CITES requirement of sustainability, in 2012 we started a study to assess basic population demographic information on Missouri's rivers and reservoirs. And that just included size, structure, age and growth, and then total animal mortality. But after getting all that information, we realized that the level of exploitation in each one of these systems was lacking. And so in 2015, we started a statewide paddlefish reproduction and exploitation study that was inclusive of all our large reservoirs and large rivers within Missouri. So that occurred from 2015 through 2019. And so for the river portion, our main focus was on the Mississippi River because it incorporates both recreational and commercial fishery. But we did work with some regional biologists, fisheries management biologists, to include other popular sport fisheries. And so what we did is we went out and sampled all of these locations, and you can kind of see the length frequencies that we received. We collected anywhere from paddlefish 6 inches all the way up to 48 inches. So we had quite a wide array of sizes that we were able to collect. And then all fish that were over our current length limit, which is 24 inches on the Mississippi River and all the other rivers within the state, we attached a jaw band, which has an individual number and then a number so that people can call that number and report whether they caught one of those tagged paddlefish while out snagging, or a commercial fisherman could report that it was caught as well. And so it looks a lot like a duck band, but it's just a jaw band that goes on the lower jaw of the paddlefish. And so each one of those fish that we collected within this sample that was over 24 inches, we attached one of those tags so that we could evaluate exploitation on each one of those systems. And so to come up with our exploitation estimate, we basically used this equation down here. So we had the number of jaw bands that were harvested and called in and reported, and then the reporting rate, and then that total value was divided by the total amount of jaw bands that were available on each harvest. or in each system. And so here's just a table that shows the 3 main ones that we focused on. Just shows how many we tagged, how many that were called in and reported as harvested, and then our total, our yearly exploitation estimate. And it's important to keep in mind that these numbers, if you divided 92 by 200 or 2,224, it doesn't actually equal 2.5. These are estimates that have been adjusted based on tag loss and that tag reporting, or whether our non-reporting estimate that we came up with. And if you'll notice, we have really quite low exploitation estimates on the Mississippi River and St. Francis. The 26.3 is getting on the cusp of that level of where we might start to be concerned. And that's based on, for a long-lived, late-maturing fish like paddlefish, total annual mortality of 30% is kind of where you start to kind of get a little bit concerned about that level of mortality. And within that mortality is our exploitation or fishing mortality, and then it's also additive for natural mortality as well. So that 26.3 is on the cusp of starting to get concerned about. Some of the other things that we noticed whenever we were doing this exploitation study is that on the Mississippi River especially, recreational harvest was quite similar to what we saw with the commercial harvest, and we weren't really expecting that. We figured that on the Mississippi River main stem, it would be mainly commercial harvest and just a few people would be out recreational fishing, and we saw that there was actually similar levels between the commercial and recreational harvest. And then on all 3 of the systems, we noticed that the annual variation between our exploitation estimates was quite variable. And so we kind of wanted to look at that a little bit more. And this graph on the right just shows an example. So we used commercial harvest. So we have pounds of flesh that were harvested, and then our annual exploitation. So the pounds of flesh harvested are the black dots, and the annual exploitation estimate is on the gray dots. And then on the y-axis, we have number of effective fishing days. And so basically, this was related to river levels. So we used when the number of days within the commercial season, or whenever commercial fishermen were out, and when the number of days that the river level was at an effective day where the gear could actually fish effectively for paddlefish and inlets in the flow, basically. And so, as you can see on years whenever the number of effective fishing days was low, our exploitation and harvest was actually low. And years where we had higher effective fishing days, we had higher exploitation, and the pounds of fish that were harvested actually increased quite a bit. And so we started thinking about that as far as our own sampling as biologists, and as well as how effective snaggers might be as well, not just our commercial fishermen. And it became apparent pretty quickly that both our ability as biologists to sample paddlefish and fishermen's ability to catch, whether it's snagging or netting, was really correlated to whether the river stage was high enough or low enough to make whatever gear they're using actually be effective. So another piece of information to ensure that we're keeping these fisheries and maintaining sustainability, because the river populations are solely maintained through natural reproduction, they're not stocked. And so it's important to make sure that our length limits allow a certain amount of the spawning stock to be available at all times. And so whenever we were out sampling, we checked each one of the fish that was over 24 inches, which is our current minimum length limit, for sex to see if they were male or female, and then we also looked at maturity. And so at our current length limit, there were no fish that were mature. So basically, at the current length limit that we have, all fish can be harvested before they have the chance to spawn even once. And so whenever we started to see that a substantial proportion of fish were actually mature, was at 32 inches. And so at 32 inches, 41% of the fish that we checked and looked at, 41 were mature females. And so by mature, that means they were either going to spawn that year or they had already spawned a year before, but were already starting to create eggs to be able to spawn again. And so we didn't really see any mature fish below 28 inches. 28 inches, a little bit plus, was where we started to see that mature fish start to join the population. And so we feel that 32 inches would allow 41% of those females to at least have one chance to spawn, if not multiple times to spawn, before they had a chance to be harvested. So some of the current issues that we see with our river paddlefish management, while we do have low exploitation rates on the rivers, it doesn't appear as though that 24-inch minimum length limit is actually sufficient and may not actually support our current goals, both our state goals for a sustainable fishery and also CITES requirement to prove that we have a sustainable fishery. And that's solely just because we're not protecting those immature fish and allowing them to be harvested before they can actually spawn. So if we see any increase in harvest, that could be an issue whenever you're not allowing those small fish to be able to spawn before they can be harvested. Another thing along with the CITES is that since paddlefish are completely migratory, we tagged fish in Cape Girardeau and they got detected and caught down in Mississippi. So they move all throughout the basin. They went up to Gavin's Point Dam, Iowa. They move throughout the dams and just kind of move all over the place. So they're extremely migratory. And so the states within that are also have that commercial fishery and are also required to report through CITES are starting to see that we might need to manage these fish more on a basin-wide scale and not just on a state level. And so one organization that is trying to get that where you have basin-wide management going is MICRA, and they're actually thinking about potentially proposing to have a 34-inch minimum on the Mississippi River for those states that have the commercial fishery. And so that's just something to keep in mind that might actually I guess, come out here in the near future, I guess. And so for the reservoir portion of the study, since I said it was a big, a 5-year study on both our rivers and reservoirs, we focused mainly on the 3 big reservoirs that are maintained through stocking, so Harry S. Truman, Lake of the Ozarks, and Table Rock Lake. While sampling for fish to put those jaw bands in, just like we did on the river, we caught over 9,000 fish that range from 14 to 50 inches and 1.5 to 103 pounds. And so, again, just like the rivers, we only tag those fish that are over the 34-inch current minimum length limit. And so, not all 9,000 were tagged, but I think it was over 8,000 that actually got the tags that were over the 34-inch minimum. And then our reporting rate was really good on the reservoirs. It was 91 to 95%. So we felt like we had really good cooperation with our snaggers, and they really participated well as far as calling in those tags and reporting fish whenever they caught them. Our exploitation estimates for each one of those reservoirs, it was calculated the same way, the same equation as I showed you with the river. And as you can see, each one of the reservoirs is pretty low, right around 8%. Not really alarming at this point or anything like that. It's pretty much considered quite low. Again, it's adjusted for any tag loss and tag reporting. Like I said, that was 91 to 95% on each one of those reservoirs. So it appears as though currently we have a pretty low level of exploitation on each one of these reservoirs. Some other information that we learned, whenever we got to talk to all these snaggers, it was probably, I think we have over 3,000 people that we talked to whenever they called those tags in. But we learned a lot just talking to the snaggers, and some of the things that we learned was that people are coming from over 25 different states to come to Missouri and enjoy the snag fishery, this unique fishery that we have. And so that was really interesting just to hear where everybody has come from. We even added a couple more states to the map this year that I didn't get a chance to update. But so people are coming from a long ways away to come to Missouri and enjoy this resource that we have. And another thing that we noticed was people would call in their tags and they'd want to know where it was caught or where we had tagged it, how big it was and everything. And so whenever we looked at that, we started to notice that fish that were tagged in Truman Reservoir were being caught in Lake of the Ozarks or out on the Osage River. And so we took a little bit closer look at that, and even in Table Rock, they were being caught in Bull Shoals and below Powerside Dam, it was amazing how well these fish were able to maneuver through Truman and Bagnall Dam, survive. We have ones that came all the way, were tagged in Truman, went into Lake of the Ozarks, and then swam all the way up the Missouri River and were caught below Gavin's Point Dam. And so, I mean, they can move through the dams and survive and go upriver. So, somebody just didn't find it down below Bagnall or anything like that. So, it's pretty amazing what percent So just to give you an idea, for an example, 30% of the paddlefish that were tagged in Truman Lake were caught and reported by fishermen that was snagging in Lake of the Ozarks. So 30% of those fish that we tagged in Truman were caught down below in Lake of the Ozarks. And then 9% of the ones that were caught in Lake of the Ozarks were actually caught on the Osage River or another river, like the Missouri River or Kaskaskia or any of the other rivers that they can get out down below the reservoirs. So it's pretty interesting just in itself, kind of as a gee whiz. And kind of, it makes us think more about our stocking rates. That could really affect how many we need to stock in each location whenever we know that many are actually leaving the systems that you think they're on. So what does all this mean for our current management? If you remember, our overarching goal is to manage paddlefish as a high-quality sport fish. And so some of those specific goals that we had underneath there was that the average weight of those harvested was 30 pounds or more. And so we used our sample since we had a fancier scale out there, and we could actually see what it was weighing and know that we felt good about the weight estimates we got. But so 73% of the fish that we sampled on all 3 reservoirs was over that 30 pounds. So we feel like we're meeting that goal pretty well, much over average at 73%, and at least 20% of those fish at 50 pounds or more. And while we only had 17% of our sample that was over the 50-pound mark, that's really close to 20%, and Table Rock Lake actually had over 26% of those fish that were over 50 pounds. So we're not quite meeting that goal, but we're really close. The other goal, the specific goal that we have for those reservoirs is an annual average harvest of 3,000 fish or more. And so we were able to use the tags that we put out there for our exploitation estimates to also make a population estimate for each one of the systems using Program Mark. And so we came up with our population estimates for each one of the reservoirs, and then we have our reservoir-specific exploitation estimate. So Lake of the Ozarks and Truman appear to be at least able to meet that goal of 3,000 fish being harvested, whereas Table Rock wouldn't quite meet that goal, but it's really close at just over 2,000 fish. So we're really close to meeting that goal as well. Some of the current issues that we saw regarding our reservoir paddlefish management, even though we have really low exploitation, some of the resource managers have begun to become a little bit concerned about whether our current regulations can help us maintain the sport fishery, as there's a perceived kind of increase in either an interest in snagging, the interest in the trophy fish, definitely some concern over evolving fishing methods like live scope, and then there's still a little bit of perceived concern about fishing for eggs, whether that's illegal or just people coming to focus to catch paddlefish for eggs. So to just kind of wrap up our 5-year study, that was a lot of information, I know, I'm sorry about that. So based on our data, it looks as though our fisheries, our river fisheries, aren't quite meeting the goals of a sustainable fishery. We're just allowing those fish to be harvested before they can spawn, and that just doesn't, if you have any kind of increase in harvest at all, it's not going to maintain that sustainability. On the reservoirs, we appear to be meeting most of our goals at this current time. If not, we're really close to meeting those goals. However, there is some concern about a perceived increase in harvest that could potentially be happening. And so because of that, we really think it's going to be important for us to revise our paddlefish management plan and update it so that we can meet the current needs and goals that we have on our rivers and reservoirs. And so in order to do that, we really went through all this information that we got from the 5-year study and tried to use that information to see if we could address some of these issues and make some changes to our current regulations to help address those issues. And so we gathered input from the managers on all of the systems that have big paddlefish fisheries, and then we also pulled the protection staff as well, since they are the ones that we're going to have to enforce any kind of regulation changes. And so from that input that we gathered, we came up with a couple of recommendations for some potential changes that we might be able to make both on the commercial and the recreational sector. And so on the commercial, we came up with 2 recommendations. The first one is to increase that minimum length limit from 24 to 32 on all of our rivers. Now that wouldn't change our 34-inch minimum current that we have on the reservoirs. That would stay the same. So we're just increasing the river length limits from 24 to 32. And basically that would just allow paddlefish to reproduce before they can be harvested and hopefully ensure that we maintain that self-sustaining population on those rivers. The second one is to, develop a harvest season. Right now, Missouri is the only commercial state that doesn't have a harvest season. And so these November 1st through April 15th is kind of the time whenever we see the majority of the harvest that occurs. And it would align pretty closely with a lot of the other states that we have within the Mississippi River Basin. And research also shows that the net fishing that you catch paddlefish in on the river for those commercial fisheries is more likely to either cause mortality for paddlefish and other bycatch whenever water temperatures are high. And so the harvest season kind of only makes sense to avoid any kind of incidental mortality that might occur. And we actually looked at some of our harvest data from the commercial fishery, and that there's little to no harvest before or after these dates. So it wouldn't really affect anything, but it makes biological sense to make sure that that harvest can only occur within that time frame. So for the recreational fisheries, some of the recommendations that we had, this is just the same one. For the river, on the recreational fishery, you would also have a 32-inch minimum, increasing our 24-inch current. So basically you're just allowing, again, those paddlefish to reproduce before they can be harvested. But then also on the recreational side, this is our length limit, or our length frequencies again that I showed you earlier. The first line is the 24-inch minimum. So you can see we're not really protecting very many fish by having a 24-inch minimum. The second line is a 32-inch minimum. And so there are quite a few fish that are going to be protected by having a 32-inch minimum. And the goal would be, or the hopes would be, that those fish that you're not harvesting at 24 inches would then grow into these larger size classes and potentially increasing the size of fish that are available for harvest in the future. It's not going to happen immediately, but in 5 to 10 years, people are going to start to see, hopefully, see increased sizes on some of these fisheries as well. The other recommendation that we would like to see considered for the recreational fishery is to include a definition of snagging in the wildlife code, and then also clarify some of the methods. And so the protection folks have been working with us to develop this definition. So basically we would have a definition that says snag or snagging, the act of hooking or attempting to hook a fish in part of the body other than the mouth or jaw by means of a pole, line, and hook. Snagging is characterized by repeated drawing or jerking motion of a pole, line, and hook, or by trolling with an unbaited hook rather than enticement by bait or lure. And so that would basically just define what snagging is and make it a little bit more clear whenever it comes to enforcement of snagging regulations. And then the clarification would come before you were allowed 3 poles, and now we are limiting that to just 1 pole per person whenever you're attempting to take paddlefish by snag, snare, or grabbing. The last recommendation we have for the recreational fishery is really just to keep consistency. So right now we have a current regulation where after no person shall take more, no person should continue to snag after the take of the 2 daily limit paddlefish that you're allowed to harvest. And so right now that already occurs on Truman, Lake of the Ozarks, and the Osage River, and Table Rock was not included in that. And I guess because they were worried that those snagging for other fish would be affected by having to stop after catching their 2 paddlefish. And so when talking to the biologists down there and looking at this a little closer, it was determined that adding Table Rock to that regulation would just make things much more clear and more concise and kind of level the playing field between all the reservoirs and big paddlefish fisheries that we have. So our next steps with these potential regulation changes that we're trying to move forward with is basically to get the word out about them. In order this, we want to make sure that we give the public fair warning and some reasoning so they can see what we found with our 5-year study. So basically, we want to update the Paddlefish website with information from our study. We've been working with Francis Galicki to develop a communication plan and also an FAQ for the website. And then we've also worked with Michelle Bomber, Ron Reeds, Tom Truman, and Johnson, who are helping us to develop how to obtain some public input for these potential regulation changes. And we really want to focus that public input from our existing communication base. And so for the commercial fishery, in order to harvest a paddlefish, you have to buy a roe harvester permit. And so we know the exact name, address, whatever, for each person that is a commercial harvester in the state of Missouri. So it'll be really easy to go ahead and ask those specific people how they would be affected by that regulation and if they have any issues with it. So it's super easy to get their input on that. And then in order to get input from the recreational fishers, Trish Yasmer sends out a snagging report every week of the commercial or the snagging season, and so she has a database of those people that are really interested in snag fishing. And then we also have those 3,000 people that I was talking about that we talked to that called in and reported. So we know they're willing to work with us, and we have their name, addresses, and everything. So we would like to get public input from those people as well about potential regulation changes that may affect their recreational fishing as well. So overall, these proposed regulation changes that we're trying to bring forward will help. We feel like it will help the state with our specific management goals on the rivers and reservoirs, and also ensure that we meet that sustainability goal that we're required to meet for sites in the Fish and Wildlife Service. And so with that, I will happily take any questions if anybody has any.
Fellow commissioners, questions, please.
I've never gone snagging. I always wondered if that group was going to take the end of your character reason, but any information on mortality rate of fish that are snagged that are below the minimum legal limit and then released?
Very good question. So we actually, while we were out there doing that, we had specific questions whether snagging would cause delayed mortality. And so we looked at, we actually went out and snagged some fish, took blood samples. So we took cortisol levels right as we got them in the boat, and then took cortisol levels, so blood samples, 4 hours later to look and see if those cortisol levels went back to what we would consider normal. And so regardless of size, we snagged, I want to say 20-inch fish all the way up to probably 40-inch fish. And we did not see any delayed mortality within that 4-hour time period. And we've had, I want to say, I think it was a small sample size, so it was only 25 fish that we actually got to do this with. But we've already had 8 of those fish caught by other snaggers, like 5 years down the road or 3 years down the road. And those fish survived us snagging them, and then were caught again by other snaggers. So there's quite a bit of evidence out there. There's other states that also allow snaggers to catch and release. And so we've kind of been throwing that idea around too, whether if we're really concerned about increased harvest, is that a potential that we could throw out there, where you would have catch and release days, or at least allow people to release fish and not require that you harvest the fish that's on our.
So the current regs don't have anything on hook size, limitation, or you can just use whatever you want?
They do not currently know.
Which is pretty simple. It makes sense to me that you lose some fish, just be caught in the belly or something like that.
We didn't see any delayed mortality. I think the gaffing probably does the most. The most. Thank you.
Just one more question. So
Sure.
if Missouri has one set of rules and Illinois has a little bit different set of rules, which one prevails?
Whichever side of the river you put in on,
Okay.
where you have a license.
I see. Thank you.
Sarah, hold just a minute. It is very obvious that you know this subject very well. And you've been here 9 years, is that correct?
Yes.
Have you supervised this 5-year plan?
Yes.
Why are you leaving?
Because I got the opportunity to work across the river in Illinois, and I
Oh,
think
there you go.
that's been a struggle for us to be able to
You
work
left
with
the
that
number
state.
one state to go to Illinois.
Crossing the river, okay. Well,
Yes,
that's
sir.
like it is. Yeah.
Hopefully that will make for better cooperation between the states and
Is
will
that,
increase
is
communication.
that because you went to SIU?
I'm actually from Illinois, so
Okay.
I'm kind of,
Okay.
it's close to my heart. But I get to stay on the Mississippi River and fish for
Well,
codfish.
thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Very
Well,
good.
Dan, good luck to you.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
One more question. What
Sure.
time frame are we on to revise the plan?
To revise the plan, I think we would like to see that happen before mid-year code review, but since I'm leaving, I can say that. I'm sure those that are going to be left behind, that's probably a pretty fast timeline for that to happen. But we would like to see that revised as soon as possible so that we could have that in place. Because it's clear that the goals within that management plan aren't quite what they should be for our current needs and the current issues that we're seeing with the codfish fisheries.
Thank you. Good luck,
Thank you.
trader. Mike, you're back.
Yes, I'm back. It's terrible. Commissioner, since my last regulations report, citizens have provided input on topics including allowing the use of bicycles on conservation areas and service roads, bears, deer, elk, turkey hunting regulations, and fur bearer hunting and trapping regulations. A summary of all the comments received is included in my formal report, beginning on page 3. Mr. Chairman, unless you members of the commission have questions, this concludes my formal regulations committee report.
Any questions, Mike? Very
I really appreciate extending the AMR season. As a landowner, that's probably going to really give me my best opportunity for my harvest management on my farm. I think it's a great addition. The other comment is, I know we're getting a lot of criticism on turkey management, so I'm anxious to see what you guys come up with on doing some positive changes on that.
Absolutely. So with that, I'll go ahead and move on, if that's okay with the commission.
Please continue, sir.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Protection Branch Chief Randy Dolman, who'll say a few words about a Protection Branch K-9 program, and I'm not going to give all of his background. You guys know Randy very well. So, with that, Randy.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Chair, Director Pauly. Very excited today to talk about our Protection K-9 program. This is an historic day for the department, a historic day for Protection Branch, and one that I'm personally extremely proud of to be a very small part of. All 5 NBC handlers and K-9 teams officially graduated from Indiana's 2021 Wildlife Law Enforcement K-9 Tracking and Detection School. We are extremely proud of these teams and what they have successfully accomplished during their 9 weeks of intense K-9 training in Indiana. And rather than have me go through the introductions of the team, I'm going to let Russell Duckworth, Captain Duckworth from our Southeast region, do his presentation here shortly. I'm not going to steal his thunder. But on a personal note, I do want to say how extremely proud I am as Protection Branch Chief of not only Deputy Chief Dean Harry, Captain Russell Duckworth, and their leadership of this endeavor, which is several years in the making, their entire team of K-9 handlers and our K-9 committee that has brought us to this point, something the department should take great pride in, and I know we certainly do in Protection Branch. So with that, I will introduce Protection Captain Russell Duckworth. Grew up in a row crop farm in Stoddard County. Russell received a bachelor's degree from the Southeast Missouri State University in May of 1993. And Russell began his career with the MDC on June 1, 1993, working in Otter Slough Conservation Area in our Wildlife Division. Russell was accepted in the Conservation Aid Training Academy in 1997. We were classmates together. and was assigned to Wayne County in July of that year. Russell transferred to Stoddard County as a conservation agent before then transferring to Cape Girardeau County. Shortly after transferring to Cape, Russell promoted to district supervisor in 2010 and then to protection regional supervisor in 2016. In 2016, Captain Duckworth had the opportunity to attend the NACLAC Training Academy, where his project focused on the possible implementation of a canine program for MDC. So 5 years later, once again, Russell proves that determination and perseverance are probably the most important leadership characteristics we can have. So, congratulations for that, Russell, and with that, I will turn the floor over to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Director Polly. So, it is a historic day. Probably other than the day that these guys graduated the academy, today is probably one of the proudest days in their career. So this is a long time coming. So why do we want the canine program in the first place? What's the need for it? Well, when you look at our department mission, our mission is to protect and manage the fish force and wildlife resources of the state, to facilitate and provide opportunity for all citizens to use, enjoy, and learn about these resources. It's our duty to find new ways to accomplish this mission, and having the new program is going to greatly aid us in establishing and accomplishing this mission. In addition to that, we do have agents in the past who have successfully used their own privately owned dogs in the performance of their duties, and that's worked very well. So this is a more formalized way to accomplish the same successes that we saw with those and keep it all coordinated in one program. Our strategic plan. We have determined that there are lots of avenues, lots of places in our strategic plan that this program is going to assist us in being successful in meeting the plan. A little bit of history first. So the state of New York in the late 70s determined and decided, you know what, there's lots of success with other law enforcement agencies out there that are detecting bombs and detecting narcotics, all of these things. Why can't we put that into play in the fish and game world? So they did that, and they were very successful in it. A few years later, then the state of Florida did the same. Currently, in 2013, there are 25 states that had their own canine program in a Fish and Wildlife Agency, and that number has grown as the years have gone by. Florida model versus the Indiana model. That talks about training just a little bit. Very quickly after Florida established their program, then they started training their own people. They weren't going to other places for training. They did their own in-house training. Indiana followed behind very quickly. Indiana went to Florida, learned how to do that, and they've been doing their own program for a number of years. So, training for our staff, where did they go? So they went to Indiana, and they were in Indiana for a total of 9 weeks. That occurred in 3-week blocks. So they went for 3 weeks, they were home for 3 weeks, went back for 3 weeks, etc., until they were finished. So they've had lots of time on the road while they were there. They were accompanied by officers from Kansas, Utah, and Virginia this year as well. They were attending the same academy together. So, what do other states do with their canines in the fish and wildlife world? Well, tracking is about 1/3 of what they do. Evidence recovery is about 18% of what they do. Wildlife detection is about 12%, and we're going to talk about this a little more in just a minute. But public demonstrations creates it takes up the majority of the time that our teams will be doing. This is what other states have found that their canines are asked to do, so this is what they spend their time doing. So let's talk about tracking. So when you start talking about tracking, think of a lost child, or maybe an elderly person that's dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's. Those folks get lost, we need to find them quickly, especially if it's cold weather, raining out. You want to find those folks as quickly as you can. The canines want to find them a lot faster than I am. So they're going to be a great aid there. One thing that I should say here, sometimes folks watch cops and other shows on TV and they think aggressive dogs, whenever they're tracking down a person, then there's going to be a bite at the end, that sort of thing. You'll notice with our dogs that these are all sporting breeds. Our dogs are not that type of dog. They're not trained to do any of that, and they won't be. Whenever they find what they're looking for at the end, they're wanting a reward, and these guys will be able to show you today, their reward is a toy of some sort. They want to play as their reward, not finding a person, not catching a person. Area searching. So think of a firearm that's been discarded, something that has been tossed for some reason, maybe a shell casing from an elk poaching case. Something that we need to find that, once again, is really hard for a person to do. The dog's going to be able to do that very efficiently and very quickly. Wildlife detection. They can obviously smell much better than we can. Other states use dogs for not only endangered species, but invasive species as well. Things like zebra mussels, that sort of thing. Their nose is way better than ours, as everyone knows, and they can effectively do this in a short time frame. Commercial wildlife. So this is a photo that I took. I happened to be flying through the Atlanta airport, and the Fish and Wildlife Service has lots of displays with things that they seize. And this is, there are millions of dollars worth of not only hides, but also ivory and skins, and you will see purses and belts and all kinds of crazy things that are imported into the country. We have that opportunity, and we will be able to work these dogs in the airports and find some of that stuff if we decide that we need to do that. So that's another opportunity that we currently don't have. Public demonstrations we talked about already. This is probably the biggest thing that is going to be a success for us based on what other states are seeing. Because when I walk in a room, or any of the other conservation agents walk into a room, sometimes when a person sees you in uniform, that can be off-putting a little bit. They're not sure if they want to come up and talk to you or not at first. But when the dog is there, then it removes all of those barriers, and we really think this is going to allow us to be able to interact engage with new groups as we go along. So we think the public demonstrations, the education side is going to be huge. Again, we talked about zebra mussels and being able to detect lots of things that we currently can't. Sources, where do we get the dogs? So the two places that we got the dogs, it depends on which of the breeds, and we'll show you each of them here shortly. But we went to Georgia and Alabama is where we went. We looked all over the country. We worked with the Office of Administration and NBC Purchasing, which I will tell you is a bit of a daunting task to take over, because when you tell them that you want to buy dogs, and they look at you like you're crazy. So that took a little working through, but we were able to do that, and we located some good vendors. These vendors that we used work with lots of governmental agencies around the country, so they're very well known and are good at what they do. So we have certainly good dogs. This is where the labs came from, is from the 5B farm in Alabama. Equipment. So obviously when you've got a new partner that's on 4 legs, and you've got to have stuff that I don't need in my truck. So the top photo is a view through what would be the rear seat of our truck. Well, that all comes out of a brand new truck, and then you put this cage there in the back for the dog to be in. The picture there below is what the home kennels look like. Want to give a big kudos to George Winnison and the shop crew at Salem. They were really good to work with. They helped us find solutions to work through what we needed. So they have been just outstanding to work with. Same goes with Todd Larrabee and the IT crew. There's lots of new things that we needed. They have GPS tracking college. If it comes to going to court, then we need to be able to show exactly where we went, when we did it, how long it took. So that is all generated through that GPS collar that then goes back to electronic records. In addition to that, then our record keeping system is all brand new, and the IT folks helped us get that established and up and going. So everything has been really good to gel together. So total cost. Obviously, whenever you start a program like this, and there's going to be an initial cost, you've got to buy the dogs, you've got to buy the kennels, you've got to buy the cages and the new equipment. Going forward, it's going to be annual maintenance. Hopefully, from here on out, it's vet visits, and even with the food, Diamond Pet Foods and Purina have come on board, and they're supplying all the food for the dogs. And we're starting to get those donation requests, donations coming in. So I think as it goes along, other states see that once you kind of get established, then you get all kinds of equipment that's just donated to you. And we think that'll be the case here too. So again, the new program is going to help us meet lots of areas, help us meet our goals, help us meet the strategic plan that we've got together, and it's going to really be a big boon and allowing us to do a even better job of meeting our department mission. And here is a photo from last Friday in Indianapolis of when they graduated. So without further ado, then I will let the guys come up. Any questions before they do?
Questions?
Yes, sir.
Mark?
I see you're using private sector vets to take your veterinary care. Is that what I saw?
That makes things easier because these guys are all out in the field in certain areas, and sometimes something happens, like we had one of our dogs that ran into a fence post or something and created a spot on the side. So we want to be able to have the opportunity to get them into vet care as quickly as we can. So yes, we're currently using local vets to get these dogs taken care of.
And then the dog is part of the family of the Asian, is that correct?
That's absolutely right. So they go in, they acclimate with the families. Now we do have the kennels outside, and we do want them to stay outside to some degree, but they do come in, acclimate with the family, other pets, that sort of thing, that the kids, so that they are part of that family and they establish that bond. Yes, sir.
So then long-term, when the time comes to retire that particular dog, it will continue part of the family, is that?
Well, we currently have the policy that is established. Typically what states will do is the handler that has been working with that animal, then they have first choice of getting the dog back. So that's kind of what has been discussed, but quite frankly, I'm not sure if we're
No, I know that's in the future, I understand.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Russell, thank you. The procedure would be they would bring 5 dogs in. We will actually do a commissioning. Each commissioner will have a badge as well as the director, and we will present the badge. Now, the one problem that we have as far as these dogs are, when we get on the commission, we have to take an oath. So, I'm curious to figure out how we do that with the dog.
I'm not sure either. We'll see how this goes.
Anyway, bring the dogs in, we have the badges. You have the badges.
They're all under.
All right. Thank you, Russell. Great job. And yes, as Russell mentioned, these are commissioned law enforcement officers. We're going to commission these dogs and their handlers. Deputy Chief Harry has the badges and the commissions there for each commissioner. And once he's ready to present those, I will introduce the handlers and their canines one at a time. They'll come down and we will present their badges.
You want to go through the list of which commissioners given which one?
Yeah. So Commissioner Brunel, you will be presenting the badge to Zara, the female German short hair for Corporal Caleb Pryor.
That's the badge. You want to put it on the
Sure. I didn't know it right there.
All right, so if Corporal Pryor, Corporal Caleb Pryor from our Northwest region and his female German short hair Zara, please come on down for your commission.
This is cool. Steve, is this my puppy?
Yes, sir.
Right here?
Yes, sir.
It's okay, look what you get today. You have to take the oath. You have to take the oath of office. Look here. How about that? Here.
Oh, thank you.
He is now, she is now a commissioned officer.
I'll get to do it.
All right, our next commission will be for Commissioner Orschling, presenting the badge and commission to Corporal Don Cleaver and his female lab, Penny. Corporal Cleaver. Corporal Cleaver serves in our northeast region, the Marion County, Danville area.
Here we go, buddy.
And they are excited for their badges. They've worked hard for them.
Can you read this? Here. Got a pocket?
As you can tell, they're ready to go. I understand you met a couple of them last night. Is that correct? Very good. Very good. All right. Next will be Commissioner McHenry presenting the badge and commission to Corporal Justin Piber and his female lab, Cora.
All right.
Corporal Piber and Cora serve in our Kansas City region.
All right, Casey boy. Here we go.
Yeah, right there. There we go. You got it. Okay, there we go. Perfect. A little sweaty, let's see.
Let's get up here.
Come on, Mark.
Go ahead.
There we go. Like your handler, she's full of energy.
Okay. Got it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, next we will have Commissioner Harrison presenting the badge and commission to Corporal Alan Lamb and his male German Shorthair, Tex.
Here you go, Aaron.
Text.
And last but certainly not least, we have Director Pauly presenting the badge and commission to Corporal Susan Swim and her male lab, Ashford. Corporal Swim serves in our Polk County area down in southwest Missouri.
Sit, Esther. Sit. Stay. Things are going to work.
this up on real quickly on behalf of all of our protection branch and the commission as well. Thank you to our new K-9 officers, our new team of handlers, and the leadership that got us to this point. We could have not done this without a collaborative team effort. The support from the commission and administration has been fantastic. So with that, there's no questions, commissioners. I'll turn this over back to
Andrew.
Andrew. You get part of that, Andrew. Good luck, sir.
Thank you, Randy. What a kickoff to a great program. You're up, Andrew.
Well, I usually follow some exciting topics, but I've never followed a dog before, so I might have to pull the room down a little bit. Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission, Director Foley. It's my pleasure to present the financial summary report for fiscal year 21 through March. You'll first turn your, the report was provided in your advanced materials. You'll turn your attention to page 4 of the report. I'll start with the revenues. Total revenues in FY21 through March were 3.1% higher than fiscal year 20 through March and 3.1% higher than expectations. Conservation sales tax were 4.5% above the same time period in FY20 and 6% above expectations. Permit revenues were 22.3% higher than at this point last year and 10.6% above expectations. The number of monetary hunting and fishing permits sold for FY21 through March were 284,816 higher than the previous year. Federal reimbursements were 20.2% lower than the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 20 and 17.8% below expectations. Federal reimbursements were delayed in March, but expected to rebound to expected amounts by the end of the fiscal year. Other revenue sources for the first 9 months of fiscal year 21 were 1.9% higher than the first 9 months of fiscal year 20 and 10% above expectations. I'll move on to expenditures, which starts on page 5 of your report. Total operating expenditures for the first 9 months of FY21 were in line with the first 9 months of fiscal year 20 and 9.1% below expectations. Operating expenditures includes personal services, expenses, and equipment purchases. Personal service distributions were 2.1% lower than the previous fiscal year and 7.6% lower than expected through March of 21. Expenses were 3.7% lower than at this point in the last fiscal year and 11.9% below expectations. Equipment disbursements were 57.5% higher than the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 20 and 9% below expectations. Some of the variance from expectations is due to some supply chain issues due to the pandemic. Total capital disbursements were 34.7% lower than the previous fiscal year through March and 34.3% below the mid-year budgeted amount at this point in the fiscal year. Capital expenditures include land conservation partnership and construction. Delays in Fountain Grove wetland renovation project in FY21 are mainly responsible for the expenditures below expectations. Total disbursements for fiscal year 21 through March were 4.3% lower than the same time period in fiscal year 20 and 12.2% below expectations. This concludes my remarks on the fiscal year 21 summary through March, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
So the anticipated reduction in revenue due to COVID really didn't take place?
Correct. Economic remains strong. The stimulus amounts are running through the economy. And people are spending money and sales tax is up.
Probably too early to project, but with the Wayfair tax approval, is that going to have an impact?
It will. It may take a year and a half before we actually see some revenues. We were very anxious when Amazon put their footprint in Missouri, but we didn't see a market increase there either. So I would say projections are varied as far as how much will come in, but it will be a net positive, definitely. For the
It'll be
state.
a positive at the end of the day, right?
Correct. But probably a 23 more than a 22 impact.
But you're getting the use tax from Amazon currently, though, correct?
Currently getting internet sales, yes.
Thank you. Good report.
Thank you.
We do have an action item, and that is to approve the 2022 proposed expenditure plan. Here.
Correct, sir.
We've reviewed it, we've talked about it, we've changed, and today is a big day. So I would call for a motion at this time to approve this plan.
So moved.
Motion by Mark, is there a second? Second by Steve. Any discussion?
Other than just good job, I know I appreciate you listening to us a couple months ago on this and making the appropriate adjustments, and obviously the revenue is impacted on the expense side, which is appropriate, and then where the resources have been directed is helpful in that process. So I know it's an ongoing, year-long process, Andrew, and appreciate all your good work and your team making this step forward on next year's budget.
Thank you. Definitely team effort.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Jacob, you're up for the program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Director Pauly. I have some highlights to share from the construction status report that's in your advanced materials. I'd like to share on the first page on line 2, for Four Rivers Conservation Area, we have awarded the materials contract for the structure gate replacement. That gate is those gates are being fabricated, and when they're delivered, they will be installed by the Kansas City Region Infrastructure Maintenance staff. On line 3 of the report, the bids have been opened for the stone veneer replacement at Central Regional Office. If you recall from the last commission meeting, we had just opened bids the first time. We only received one bid, and it was very high, so we rejected it. We did get better participation this time, and we are proceeding with awarding that contract. And then on line 6 of the Northeast Regional Office, the HVAC controls and replacement project, that design is complete, and it is in the pipeline for advertising that project. We're just waiting for better timing so that when the work is to start, the HVAC demands won't be as high in the office. And then line 7, Lost Valley Fish Hatchery, the whale houses service entrance modifications. I just want to advise the commission that the contractor did have some supply chain disruption due to COVID and some other factors. And so they weren't able to get the work done in the window needed before the hatchery operation started. So we actually paused that contract, and they will resume when the hatchery staff don't need the water supply as critically. And so they will resume here in June and then complete the work shortly thereafter. In the rehabilitations category, you'll recall that there is one contractor doing work on 11 tower replacements. And you'll see starting there on line 10, those tower replacements. The contractor has made significant progress on lines 11, 12, 13, and 14 on this first page, as well as lines 1 and 3 on the next page, the various towers. Contractor is making good progress now. So continuing on page 2 of the report under the rehabilitations category, at Four Rivers Conservation Area, the Pool 1 levee and structure project, the Kansas City Region Infrastructure Maintenance team is performing that work. However, with the rainy spring they've had to pull off that project site and wait until drier conditions in the summer. I'll permit them to do their work. And then on the third page of the report, under the capital improvements category, on line 1, Fountain Grove Conservation Area, I'm happy to share that we do have an executed agreement with AECom, the design consultant. They are actively working on design to rectify the situation with the sheet pile wall, and we anticipate later this summer to have a better understanding of how to proceed on that project. On line 8 at Taylor's Landing access, we opened bids April 8th, and we are in the process of executing a contract to construct that new boat ramp. And then on line 10, Shepherd Hills Fish Hatchery, the Conservation Center replacement, we do have a contract in place with a consulting firm, and they are actively working with our design team to proceed with that design. That concludes the highlights from the report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Any questions, Jacob? Yes, Mark?
Yes, I know this is a May 5th date document we're looking at, and I know we're, 15 days past it, but there's some dates I think that need to be updated on here at some point, Jacob.
Yes. Common practice for this report has been in the past, the commission would like the dates to stay static when the report is developed each fiscal year. If that's a different desire of the commission, the current commission, I can make those updates. It's just a preference of the commission.
Okay. Thank you. I know I see a lot of June 21s on here.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Steve, you had a question?
Just a couple of that. I know that, Shepherd Hills has been on my radar, and as I know, April 21st, and Commissioner Murphy back there, he probably knows all about this from 2014 forward, so I'm just anxious to see that move forward.
Yes.
The other question is, and I know Jennifer's helped me with this a little bit, Jerome Access has kind of fallen off this year, and I know we were working on some matching funds permitting thing. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about what's happening there?
So the design has been completed, and we've submitted it to, we're working through not just the permitting process, but there's also a NEPA process to assess the environmental impacts, and that's related to the federal reimbursement we're going to seek on the project. And that process will take 12 to 18 months, and our environmental compliance team is are leading that effort. So what happens is periodically the team that is writing the environmental assessment will work with the engineers to get some additional information to supplement the report that they're writing that will ultimately be submitted to Fish and Wildlife Service as part of the grant application. So that's the period of time that we're in right now. So it's still an active project, it's just we're taking care of a lot of the paperwork behind the scenes that will put us in a good position to seek reimbursement and then proceed with construction.
Would you mind sending me an email with those exact facts? That being in my radar, Jennifer, you can, so as I get harassed, so to speak, I can give the appropriate information. I know we've got some correspondence on that. I want to make sure that what I tell people is correct. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other? Thank you, Jacob. In order to expedite, Mike, you can stay there. We have 2 action items dealing with timber sales. If there's no question about that, I would entertain a motion to approve the sale on those 2 action items.
So moved. Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion?
I do, just a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Probably more for Mike, just to give me a little input. We've gotten criticism on that, and I know that we actually allocated some money in the budget for private contracting, but then we were short on foresters. I mean, I'm afraid it might end up being a wash, and, we haven't guaranteed we're going to increase the timber harvest, but it's nice to fulfill, follow through on what we have indicated, because otherwise you lose credibility with the people that are critical of us. And so 2 questions is, the money that we've allocated for private forestry management, I mean, is that being used effectively, or is it going to end up being a wash? We don't have the 7th position, we're not going to be any different, then we're going to get criticized for once.
I think it will be utilized effectively, Commissioner. We had $20,000 in the budget this year during 21 to do that work, and I think we worked out the kinks and things are working very well. We're also in the process right now of advertising and trying to hire several of those forester positions. So the combination between the FY22 resources that the Commission is committing and hopefully having a couple, 2 or 3 more of those foresters online. And I know that our regions recognize the need to do an enhanced job of getting our forest management work conducted. I think we will see real results over the next FY. And with today's action items that are in front of the commission, another additional 1.7 million board feet to be harvested with these action items is going a long way to getting us to where we normally are. And with the increases that we just discussed, I hope to see an enhanced amount of activity in that regard next year.
So of that 14 million board feet, that was our target. I mean, how close are we going to be on that? Do you have any input there? Or just
for this year, of course, our goal was not to quite get to that point, but we will be around 11, a little over 11 million board feet this year, I believe. And next year, our average is somewhere between 10 and 12 million. So we're close to what we've averaged over the last several years, even with the number of vacancies we've had and stuff. So we're still, folks are pushing real hard out there to implement these activities on the acres that they're required to be done on a management perspective.
So you know the price of lumber at lumber yards is going through the roof. Are we getting more for our lumber?
I would expect that we are. I couldn't tell you exactly that, but I can find out. I don't know if it's twice as much, and it's not building lumber that we're selling. So I will check into that through Commissioner Infante.
We have a motion on the floor, made and seconded. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, motion carries. We have another action item, but we did not remove anything from the agenda on the consent agenda. Therefore, that item is passed. Aaron, you're up for legislative.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to provide a brief legislative update. I really appreciate the opportunity to come down to Van Buren here. It's just kind of the roots of conservation. You look back at Peck Ranch, where the entire wild turkey restoration started. And kind of, we messed up here earlier, and obviously it was something that happened during the last week of session. In Sarah's presentation, we had another history note in there, not the one of Simon over there with his Lewis and Clark, but Commissioner Bedell, you may remember that in 2011 on May 5th, the first tractor trailer elk arrived from Kentucky. And I think you were here that day when we loaded them off the trailer. I think Jason had a close encounter with a couple of them, and in fact we even had a calf that was born in the trailer on the way here, and somebody had to crawl up in the trailer and get that calf, and then put it in a dog crate to get it here. So a little extra history note there, with a special touch being closer to Carter County. I also had to joke a little bit about Sarah's, and I'm always joking, you guys know that. During Sarah's remarks, she talked about the agent training class and that they had training on health and nutrition, stress management, and defensive training. And it's like, Jake and I are going to take that class next year before the legislative session. So, we've come off a very successful legislative session. We made it through the budget process. We had our operating budget and our capital improvement budgets approved by the General Assembly. Really came out really good. We received all of our new decision items. I will say that as we worked through the appropriation process, we really had good conversation with members. And the key there as we move forward is going to be get out and be proactive to work with the budget chair, our new appropriations chair, and of course Senator Hegeman, who's the Senate Appropriations Chair, to understand what we're doing, what's going on, and how we can advance and improve conversations with them. As you know, as we entered the session, we had really 4 major legislative priorities, which in my career in 15 years, I think we've worked on 2 or 3 legislative priorities. In this session, we went for 4. And so the first one was prescribed fire liability. The goal of that bill is to define liability so that a prescribed fire contractor could acquire insurance here in Missouri. We were only one of 5 states that did not have liability defined for a prescribed fire. The second dealt with our nature centers. State law currently prohibits certain sex offenders with being confined to 500 feet or present where children are often present, such as schools, or playgrounds, or public swimming pools. We just simply wanted to add our nature centers to that list. Third dealt with landowner liability. As it was mentioned earlier, we have a new program called Deer Management Assistance Program, or DMAP. And this last fall, Mike and I went up to Callaway County, met with a Farm Bureau member, a large row crop farmer up there that has a very high deer population. And we also met with Representative Ken Hayden at that time. And as we described the deer management program, the landowner was very interested. But I still have that landowner liability if someone would get hurt on my property. So we just simply wanted to exclude any landowners participating in a deer management or wildlife management program from certain types of liability. And then the fourth one, of course, was dealing with feral hogs. In 2010, legislation was passed strengthening our feral hog laws. We've since learned that law has a lot of loopholes with the definition and other issues as well. So we wanted to work with the ag groups, the conservation groups, and the General Assembly to improve the definition of feral hog, prohibit the possession of live feral hogs, and of course increase the penalty for possessing or releasing feral hogs. Well, I'm happy to report that we went 4-4, and it took to the last day of session to get this all said and done, and it was truly a team effort. From Sarah to Jake to Jennifer to Mike, Jenny, myself, and numerous other folks just working and grinding through the process. And so on the last day, House Bill 369, sponsored by Representative Tim Taylor from Bunston, was truly agreed to and finally passed. And that bill includes the prescribed fire, landowner liability, and the feral hog language. That passed in the Senate by a vote of 31-2. And in the House by a vote of 153-1. This is the first omnibus conservation bill since 1945. So really a historic moment for us to get that bill passed. Kudos to Jake for his work and the Hall's working members, really working to compromise and to develop language. What was really exciting was it wasn't only Jake, it was Farm Bureau, it was Department of Ag, it was CFM, all working together to get this legislation passed. And also, in the last week of session, we had House Bill 432, sponsored by Representative Anna Kelly, that included the Nature Center language. So the next steps, we will complete bill reviews, go through and determine if there's any issues and concerns with the legislation. That will then go to the governor for his consideration. The governor has to make a decision by the middle of July. Hopefully we'll be inviting you to a bill signing ceremony at the governor's office or maybe at one of our nature centers. You know, as we look forward, obviously Jake's going to be busy hosting a variety of legislative field trips. We actually had one going on while the commission meeting was going on. We were hosting a virtual community conservation field trip in St. Louis. We had legislators on. Commissioner McHenry will be doing one in Kansas City here in a couple of weeks. But you look at the lineup of field trips, anything from elk tours, feral hogs, goose roundups, peregrine, falcon banding, wood duck banding, dove banding, trout sampling. We're going to figure out a lot of things to get folks out there. So we're looking forward to a little bit of a break here in the interim by getting right back to work. So thank you for the opportunity, commissioners. Be happy to answer any questions.
You did a great job, Eric.
Team effort.
Thank you.
Very, very good.
And Jake.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Here's Jake. We had Representative Tim Taylor at our event last night. We had a chance to talk with him and thank him for his efforts. And there again, he was proud to do it and glad to do it.
Yeah, Representative Taylor, he's quite the treat. I know he was at the event last night, but today on Facebook he had posted when he was walking back to the Capitol, there was some guys bow fishing there on Weir's Creek, and there was a picture of him sitting there bow fishing. So, quite an outdoorsman, quite a conservationist.
Yeah. Bruce Aston was there too.
Yep.
Yeah, just to add to that, we both visited with Taylor, and him being a freshman legislator too, to really stay with this thing was, and really nice to hear the positive comments of the department. You guys really working on that hard. Appreciate it a bunch.
And thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yep.
In bringing to a close this meeting, I'd like to thank the staff of the landing for absolutely great job. in taking care of all of us. Also, let the record show that we have a former chairman of this commission and Commissioner Dave Murphy is present. Dave, stand up back there. Dave has been a tremendous friend of conservation for years and years and years. He has been to every state park in Missouri. I think what there's 88. 97. I forgot they keep adding. But anyway, thank all of you. Simon, thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
What a pleasant surprise and pleasure for you to come this far from New York. This is a little bit of change. We're happy you're here. We look forward to the balance of the afternoon. And anyway, I appreciate the help